All right, good evening and welcome to the January 13th Berlin Board of Education meeting. We're going to begin this meeting at 6:02 p.m. We'll call this to order, beginning with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we are going to start out with our report of board members. Since the last time we met, do any board members have anything that they would like to share out? I do not, so I'll throw it out to you guys.
I just want to give kudos to the new messenger system. I used it for the first time to report an absence, and super easy with the app. I'm looking at Tracy because I know she works with it. But it's super easy to use if you have the app. I encourage parents to do that.
Awesome. I should check it out. Anything else? Okay. We're going to turn it over to Anisha and Grace, and just so you know, they are going to be leaving after if they would like, just because it's a really long meeting, and I've told them they can do that.
Well, to start, on December 18th, Semester 1 Capstone seniors showcased their capstone projects, and this exhibition was open to families, friends, and members of the community. And not only did this showcase all of their hard work over the past 5 months, but it ultimately demonstrated the skills of this year's graduating class.
And up and coming, from January 21st to the 24th, students at BHS will complete their midterms and Semester 1 finals for their full and half-year classes. This will round out Quarter 2 as we enter Semester 2 on January 27th.
Next, on February 28th in the BHS Auditorium, the Berlin High School Theater will be hosting their annual musical. This year, the musical is The Wizard of Oz. Posters are expected to come out this week.
And last week, BHS hosted the Go Baby Go program. The Go Baby Go is a program that modifies ride-on cars for young children who experience mobility disabilities. Watching the kids light up as they took their first spins in the customized cars was a heartwarming reminder of how impactful this program truly is.
Finally, today, students of the new SCSU Business of Science class began their presentations of their final project. Following the format of a capstone presentation, these presentations consisted of students acting as environmental consultants to best manage and mitigate localized environmental problems.
And that is all for BHS.
Thank you. You guys can sneak out if you want. We're going to move on to committee reports. Peter is not here. We did meet as a committee. That was after the last board meeting, right? We just went over the budget.
We went before the board. We went before the last meeting.
It was before the last meeting.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so we've already shared out on that?
It was before this meeting.
It was before this meeting, yeah.
To prepare for the budget, right.
Right, so we met, I don't remember the date. He will find it. And we had a 7 o'clock in the morning meeting, and Ashley was there as well, Ashley Dorsey, and we discussed items for the budget and, to prepare for this meeting. Is there anything else for that? December 11th. Okay, so we met on December 11th, 7 a.m. Brian, did you guys meet, the curriculum committee meet since the last meeting?
We did. January 6th, does that sound right? Monday, January 6th, I believe, if that is indeed a Monday. We met and to go over what what they're going to present tonight, to look at some textbooks recommended for adoption to sort of align with the science of reading in the choice of what they vetted and what Lori and Kara are sort of recommending that we move forward with, and it was approved by the curriculum committee to be presented here tonight. So I will not spoiler alert it, so you can all see it later.
Great. Our community engagement committee met last Friday on January 10th. We had a really productive meeting, and we just talked about our committee goals as they were established. So the committees and the board, at our October meeting, we discussed our goals. But this committee held off on establishing new goals because we knew there was going to be board turnover, and we just wanted to make sure that all the committee members had input. So we utilized the board goal and committee goal document from our October 2024 meeting with the objectives for the 2024-2025 school year. And we looked at the board self-evaluation, and with that, we created a committee self-evaluation so we can check it on our progress as we continue to find ways to engage the community and ensure that we're meeting our objectives for the year. We talked about ways to engage the community. We came up with some really great ideas through our brainstorming, and we are planning our next meeting for some point next week. We talked about communication during budget season and the winter 2025 snapshot, and we have to continue those conversations. But I would say that the meeting was very productive, and I think we're excited to, work as a new committee to find ways to engage with our community. So that was that meeting. Do we have any correspondence to the board?
No correspondence to the board this evening.
Okay, now we're going to move on to audience of citizens. So members of the community can approach the board. If you would like to speak during this portion of the meeting, you will be limited to 3 minutes per resident. Would anyone like to address the board this evening? Okay, moving on to agenda item 4, personnel. We have a motion for consideration for retirement. Do we have?
I'll move that the board accept the retirement of Marlene Dema, Office Assistant at the BOE Central Office, effective with the close of business on July 11th, 2025. Also to thank her for the 24 years of service she has provided to the Berlin Public Schools and wish her good health and happiness in her retirement years.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So the motion by Gina, the second by Jen. Any discussion? I will say I'm going to miss coming in and seeing Marlene. She's always very happy and welcoming, and yeah, she'll be missed. Anyone want to say something?
I don't think you can ask for a better person to be the first person, or maybe the only person, a parent or someone that comes into the board to meet. Marlene is warm, friendly, and always positive. So she'll definitely be missed. And she's kind of been the face of the Board of Ed when you walk in. So I want to thank Marlene for all of her smiles, how much she's cared about everybody, and we'll definitely miss her. She said if you ever needed someone to fill in, she'd love to fill in. So thank you, Marlene.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we can move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4, 6, 8. So 8-0. So the vote passes 8-0. Moving on for another retirement, Joan Schmidt, speech pathologist at Emma Hart Willard in the preschool program. Do we have a motion for consideration?
I move that the board accept the retirement of Joan Schmidt, speech pathologist in the preschool program at Emma Hart Willard School, effective June 30th, 2025. Also to thank her for the 19 years of service she has provided to the youth of Berlin, and to wish her good health and happiness in her retirement years.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? I would like to say she will be missed. She works with my son, and she's wonderful, and he's made so much progress. So good luck, you guys, filling those shoes. I don't know what else to say. But she's been great, and I know that's a hard position to find, so she'll definitely be missed. Would anyone else like to add anything? Okay. We can move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 8-0. Okay, moving on to our consent agenda, which has been posted in Schoology, and it's in the expanded agenda. Do we have a motion for consideration?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So the motion by Melissa, the second by Jen. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Vote is 8-0. Moving on to new business. Brian gave us a clue that this was going to be on the agenda, and we are going to discuss textbooks recommended for adoption. So, are we turning this over to Lori and Kara? Okay. Lori and Kara, if
Well,
you'd like.
Lori's, because
Just
it's
Lori.
reading, it's really all, it's been Lori. Whether Lori's wanted it to be all Lori, it's been Lori, it's been Lori.
All right. Also tonight, Lori Donovan is here. She's one of the literacy specialists at Griswold School, and she was part of the committee. So in case there's any additional questions, she'll be here as well.
All the work you did, you can come up front too, Lori.
She's gonna get mad at me now. All right. So as you know, there's been legislation passed expecting districts to adopt one of several programs recommended by the State Department of Education and aligned with their view of the science of reading. And implementation has to be completed by July 1st, 2025. So we're in partial implementation phase. We have our foundational skills presently are aligned with the science of reading, so that's where we are now. The state broke this up into two different sections, so all the curriculum pieces that are just a total program is in that first section, and then the compendiums are beneath. So, for example, Great Minds, Wit and Wisdom is the second bullet from the bottom. And then we have to add a phonics phonemic awareness program to go along with that. So you'd have to have all of those together, and that's what we're proposing as we move forward. When we take a look at what reading looks like, we really break it down into two sections, language comprehension and word recognition. So the part that aligns with the science of reading now, according to this state, is our word recognition piece. And so we are doing that presently through From Phonics to Reading and Haggerty in grades K and 1, and From Phonics to Reading is from K to 3. The language comprehension part is the part that, according to the state, we need to update, and so that's what we are looking to do as we move forward. And that's the part that will be aligned through Wit and Wisdom. When we take a look at this, so last year, in order to get the grant funds from the state, we had to attend several trainings, and this was actually a component that we liked. That green part is the part that really talks about all of those pieces that need to be present in a child's life in order for them to be able to learn to read. So it's things like when you bring your kids to the grocery store, you talk to them about all of the fruits and vegetables as you go through, and that just builds their vocabulary. As you go through, go through a walk in the park, you name all the different kinds of trees, or you name the parts of a tree, and all of those are the types of things that happen naturally with parents before even coming to school, and then have to be a great part of whatever reading program that we use, and so that's under there. And then the foundational skills are those blue steps that lead you to reading. So if you don't have an understanding of letter sounds, that every time you look at a letter that it has a sound that corresponds to it, or more than one sound that corresponds to it, then you're not going to get to the point where you're able to take a CVC word, BAT, and blend it together in order to make a word. And then if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to decode beyond that. So all of these pieces build upon each other. So when a student struggles in reading, we look for the place that this child is having the most difficulty, and that's where their intervention is, right? So if a child's having difficulty decoding, we wouldn't go up to vocabulary comprehension and provide a service to them. So when we looked at the
selection of what we were going to do, we chose 3 programs, and the 3 programs were the 3 programs or compendiums we chose were ones that incorporated the From Phonics to Reading curriculum, or the curriculum that was adopted by Wiley Blevins. The reason we did that was because in 2019 we had over 20 teachers in pre-K through 2 be as part of we called it the Phonics Task Force, and we met and chose that as our reading program. So we had gone through we had gone to visit other schools, we had looked at all of their curriculum, we had really done a nice job vetting. We had read a book, talked about what that was, and then we landed on Wiley Blevins because we thought it met the needs of our students in Berlin the best. We had 21 staff members who wanted to be part of the choice of choosing a new reading program in Berlin, and they were K through 3 teachers. They were special education teachers, English ESOL teacher, the literacy specialist. So we had people that were represented. They were at all of the schools. So we had a nice representation as we move forward. This fall, we worked with the Hill for Literacy. They designed a protocol that helped us look at each program using the same lens. And so that had multiple meetings, several work days for teachers. They reviewed materials. We went and we visited other districts. We reached out to other districts to find out what was great and what was not so great in their programs. We met together and we chose Wit and Wisdom as our new reading program for that language comprehension part, right? So we'd keep what we already were doing for the foundational skills, and then we would add the Wit and Wisdom piece. And then there's another component called geodes. I'll talk to that a little bit as we move forward. So the reason why we chose that is we really like the fact that teachers would be able to maintain what they already know about the foundational skills and be able to move forward with that. So we weren't having to change every single part of the day. And we also saw great growth in students' phonics. So we were able to do that. They have the high interest readables, which is called geodes, and they're gonna really support our application of phonics skills. We loved that it was a very rigorous program, but it also found a lot of ways to scaffold it for students. So they have videos, they have art, they have poetry, lots of different ways to incorporate students and their interests. We loved the emphasis on the vocabulary piece, which we would have changed in our present program had we not had to make the change moving forward. So that was something we knew was an area we wanted to get better at, and this does that. All of the groups said that the professional learning was exceptional, and that's something that we really need, because in some of the other programs that we went to, they were like, yeah, the professional learning's not that great, and that's really not something you want to have to deal with on top of incorporating a new program. Some districts talked about how it really provided a way for us to integrate the program with play, which is also a legislative initiative. So that's a good thing, because then we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And it allows us to use some of our existing resources, like the decodables that we've purchased in the past few years for our small groups. So these are the 4 components. So Heggerty, From Phonics to Reading, geodes, and Wit and Wisdom are the things that we're asking for approval. And we're asking for approval altogether so that if the state ever wanted to look at what we did, they'd see all of these components together. And what you can see is the word recognition, those foundational skills in yellow at the bottom, are covered by Heggerty, From Phonics to Reading, and geodes. And then the language comprehension part is Wit and Wisdom and geodes. The geodes are generally, the Wit and Wisdom is really whole class work overall, and the geodes are small group work. And then we included these pieces in here just for you so that you'd be able to refer back to them if you ever needed to as we were going through this. And as we're planning moving forward. In February, we're doing on our professional learning day, we are doing training for the pre-K 5 teachers on the science of reading, and we found someone that we think is going to be wonderful. We spoke with her last week, and we think it's a great overview for everyone to have, including 4 and 5, because 1, you never know where 4 and 5 grade teachers will be teaching next year, and 2, it certainly still continues through that. Also this spring, we're going to do some training for the K through 3 teachers on wit and wisdom and geodes for modules 0 and 1. So module 0 is we have to figure out a way to get everyone up to speed. Anytime you put a student in a new program, they're like, what? And so we have to make sure that we get them to the right spot. We're hoping to do some curriculum writing and resource creation as part of our curriculum writing this summer, and then ongoing through next year, we need to continue that training for wit and wisdom for the teachers. We listed the districts who are doing this, and we also just put their DIRG just for your information. And then there are other ones that have also signed on recently. And that's where we are. So we're proposing that we adopt those programs moving forward.
So thank you for that. Thank you for your presentation. Before we have questions, do we have a motion for consideration? Then you guys just stay up here and then answer. Do you have anything else with your presentation? No? Okay. Do we have a motion for consideration?
I move to adopt the textbooks Wit and Wisdom by various authors and published by Great Minds, Haggerty. Phonemic Awareness, Kindergarten and Primary, by Dr. Michael Haggerty et al. And published by Literacy Resources Incorporated, From Phonics to Reading, by Wiley Blevins et al. And published by William H. Sadler, Incorporated in Geodes by various authors and published by Great Minds.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Brian, a second by Jen. Now we can open it up for questions or comments.
I just think this was a huge project for the Lories and everybody else who was involved, and thanking for taking so much time on this and making sure we got the one that seems right for everybody. It's never an easy thing when we're told we have to do something, and the challenges around that. So, thank you.
I was just gonna ask, would you say that it's a far cry from what we had, or is it fairly in line with what we've been doing? How would you?
Great question. So I think we're going to have some scheduling changes that will allow for more similarities. So I think the whole group piece might look a little bit different because we'll be exposing all children to that, so that whether they're typically a pull-out kind of kid who gets pulled out during that, that won't happen now. And then we'll have other times during the day where those kids will have pull-out if they need additional support.
So in your professional opinion, even though we're being mandated to do it, do you think it's better?
I don't know
Or
that it's
just
better,
different?
but I do think that what it provides us is a good scaffold for us to move forward.
Okay.
I appreciate the research that you guys did and sharing out that the teachers found that the professional development was useful, because oftentimes it's torture when it's not. But I like that component, and I like how you're putting it all together. So if it is questioned by the state, because we were vocal in pushing back, I think that's smart for all of us involved. For those who don't know, we did meet a year ago with our state reps about this, because we did push back on the science of reading. School districts are still going through the process right now and adopting it, and not all school districts, and some have already done it, and that's why, you have the 7 districts up there, but not all have, and they're in that process. So I think it was good that you showed us who adopted wit and wisdom, and then also just for everyone else's understanding, knowing that boards are in this same process as us. But, you know, we really did look for ways around, but I think that I appreciate how you shared that it strengthens the vocabulary piece and it gives us an opportunity. I was actually just reading about wit and wisdom over the weekend, totally something, you know, something separate. So it seemed like I think on the website it did say something about science of reading, but it seemed like a pretty good program for what it's worth from what I had gathered. So, you know, thank you for that. I do have one question. Do the individual students get assessed on their reading level, like DRA or F&P or anything like that? No?
No, but they do have unit assessments that are
Okay.
part of that, and we would look at those to make sure that they make sense.
Okay.
So we'll continue to use DIBELS
Yeah,
to
okay.
do our 3 times a year.
And that's what we've always done, and that's what we'll
Yes.
continue to do. Okay, so
Yes.
that's how we'll,
Yeah. I think the tricky part for the comprehension is there's no great assessment out there for upper grades especially to use for the comprehension piece. So it's something that we continue to look at. And every time I bring it up with my colleagues in other districts, like, yeah, we don't know. So everyone's really struggling with that piece. So if anyone wants to create one, you'd make a lot of money.
but I think working on the vocabulary piece will help with the comprehension piece. and then-
100%.
So I think that's really great. Anything else from you guys?
I'd like to make one comment. Talking about an arduous task, when this first came out with Lori, the amount of hours that Lori spent in mandatory training with the state. And I can say this, regardless of where wit and wisdom is in the spectrum of things, the amount of time that Lori put to get the best program possible for Berlin Public Schools is really commendable. So I just want to thank you, Lori, for the time.
Thank you. It was a whole team
You
effort.
know, it was countless hours and many meetings with Lori about this over time after she got off with the state for days of training. So, but thank you, and
That was the
Lori,
one I told Melissa, you never want to be near me when I'm watching a state meeting.
So I think moving forward, we definitely have the best possible option, and it's a commend all of the work that you did to get there.
Okay, anything else before we move to a vote? Thank you so much. Thanks again. I know this
Thank you.
was, it's not easy having to spend time researching and implementing something when, you know,
Thank
when
you.
we're forced to. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Wait, we can move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 8-0. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna turn it over to the Director of Finance and Operations, Ashley Dorsey, and she's going to provide us a facilities update.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to keep this brief for you guys, because we got a long day ahead of us. So the Griswold Seclusion Room project, the last part of that project was installing the pads on the walls. We had some issues with that. The original shipment was received damaged. So the last shipment came in over the break, and they were installed the first week of January. And that space is ready for use. So construction on that project is completed. Also, what happened over at Griswold over the holiday break is they experienced some minor flooding due to a faulty braided line from one of the sinks, and several classrooms were flooded. It occurred over the weekend, so when the custodian showed up on December 23rd, several classrooms were underwater. So there was a quick response from the facilities department and the custodial teams to get all that water up. We hired a mitigation company to come in and mitigate any kind of water damage, and since then everything has been taken care of. No issues are present, and it was open for the start of school. The good thing about that is that it did happen over the break, because if that happened when school was in session, we would have had to close shop for a few days there. The Willard HVAC project, it's still going forward. The functional testing of the UV and the fan coil units will begin this week, and commissioning for the chiller is still scheduled for the springtime. In regards to the other HVAC projects over at Hubbard and Griswold, the bid packages are still in the process of being completed. We're hoping to get those out on the street very soon, with bids to be coming in at the time in early spring, with hope for full construction to start end of spring or the first of the summer. There are concerns with the Hubbard projects in regards to the YMCA daycare facility that we are running out of one of the classrooms there. The concern is with these HVAC projects, there's obviously a safety concern with people or the building being occupied. So that is a problem for our summer and our spring breaks and our winter breaks when they do a lot of electrical shutdowns. Having kids in that space could be problematic for the construction team and for us as well. So the PBC has asked us to see if we could relocate the YMCA daycare for the 18 months that this project is supposed to be underway. We've identified one classroom over at Berlin High School that has the potential to accommodate the YMCA daycare with very little modifications to the existing space. The issue with having the YMCA daycare over at Berlin High School goes back to when we tried to get the daycare there in the first place, and we had issues with the reimbursement. The town of Berlin has not yet received the reimbursement from the high school construction project, so until we receive that reimbursement, there's a little bit of confusion as to whether or not having a daycare facility operating out of that space will impact that. So we're working with the state to see if, even if it's on a temporary basis, if we could operate that daycare out of that space. If we can't, we have to identify another area within district to accommodate the YMCA. So we are working together with the YMCA and other members of the town to try to get this done. And then over the break, we completed we built a wall on the third wheel mezzanine of Berlin High School for the multi-purpose room. And that was to secure a learning space and also to reduce the amount of sound going or the sound overflow into the main library area. So that job was, it's about 98% there. I believe they're still waiting on some door hardware, and then that space will be ready to go. And that's what we have.
Thank you. Any questions for Ashley?
I don't know if you can answer my question, but
I could
can
try.
I have some more information on the seclusion room?
Sure. I think actually Linda might be a better person for seclusion spaces, or maybe John on what we use the seclusion room for.
Just talking to the
Go
microphone.
up to the mic.
I have just heard bits and pieces about the seclusion room. I'm just curious to know what it's used for, who uses it, what is the purpose of the room?
Under law, seclusion can only be administered if a student is a danger to themselves or others. So sometimes we have to place a student in seclusion until we can intervene in a different way so that they're safe.
So if they're unsafe, how do you get them to the seclusion room safely?
Several identified staff members have had training. PMT is what we use in Berlin. And so there's specific techniques. There's different ways to safely escort them. We can't always get them to a seclusion room, though. So
Okay.
it's situationally based. Did you have any other questions?
That's all, thank you.
Thanks, John.
I will tell you, just not to go totally off topic, but PMT, I used to be PMT trained, and I would go through the recertification every year. And it's not a forceful way, really. You know, it's a safe, gentle way of transporting students from point A to point B with, you know, when they're being unsafe. And, you know, when you're working with students who have specific needs, like, it's the safest way for them, for the staff, than anyone else around.
I think the message here is the last thing we want to do is to actually put our hands over on a student.
Mm-hmm.
So the only time that takes place is when a student's at risk of harming to themselves or others, as John said. So the thought is to get them to the seclusion room, which is a padded room, where no restraints have to take place in that room because the student is safe. There's nothing the student can do until we can de-escalate the situation, whether that be get the school psychologist, to get the student to calm down, to get the parents to come in. That's a safe location if we can do that. And it really is safer than having someone restraining a child. So that's where the seclusion rule comes in.
I think when you're having people who work with children who aren't PMT trained and you don't have that space, you know, at my old school, because I was primarily K-1, I had chairs thrown at me. I've been hit. I've had chunks of my hair pulled out where I had like a bald spot. And, you know, it's really important to make sure that the kids are not triggered in a way where they're going to continue to escalate their behaviors. It's de-escalating. And it is very humane. Like, you know, I think and only the staff who have the PMT training are able to escort them. It's not, every teacher gets it. It's only, you know, a few. And so the training is very long, and the retraining has to happen regularly, yearly. And so, you know, I just wanted to share a little bit about because I think if I didn't have that perspective, I'd probably be sitting here thinking, what is that? And
Now, do these students have a trained individual with them at all times?
A student that was needed, if a student had an IEP, they may have a paraprofessional with them, but there may be a student that's escalated in a classroom where we have to get that student removed from the classroom, and then we'd want them to go to a seclusion room where we can de-escalate them further. It's not that we'd ever lock the door and say, you're in the seclusion room for an indefinite period of time.
I would hope
Still
not.
monitored, no. But to have a student being restrained for a prolonged period of time, they're much safer to be in a seclusion room such as this than being restrained so they don't hurt themselves or others. So that's really the rationale for the seclusion room. It's not like, okay, get them to this room. It's a safe environment for the student to de-escalate.
And the students who are going through this, they don't want to have to act this way, so it actually helps set them up for success, so then they can re-enter their classroom once they're in a better place and, you know, whatever has kind of happened and been worked through, and then they can be successful, you know. And I think when you don't have a space that they can go to, they're trashing the classroom, they're ruining other people's things, and it's really like, for me, it had been really upsetting coming back from recess, having my room be a seclusion room, and now it's trashed, and now I have to clean it up, and my things are ruined, my lunch is ruined, like all these things that happen. So it's just, you know, I think it sounds shocking, but I think it's a really safe space. So then that child who doesn't want to really act that way, they don't know why they're acting that way a lot of the times, like, can then re-enter their classroom with dignity.
Is this now something that's gonna be at all the schools or just at Griswold?
I think the best way to answer some of it is to hear right from the principal. So, Al at Hubbard, if you could come to the microphone if you could, speak to how often is a student, I want there to give a misperception of how often students are in a seclusion, because it's not that often.
Sure.
But when we do have a student escalated to that level, I think Julie makes the point, to de-escalate a student we can remove other students, but in a classroom, if a student have to be so disruptive, they're throwing chairs or throwing items, it's not safe for that student, it's not safe for the staff member. So to get them in a seclusion, there's nothing to be thrown, there's no device, there's nothing they could hit their head on, or anything that could harm them
I
further or the
understand
staff.
that.
But I think, I wanna make sure that there's an understanding of how often this takes place, and I think, Al, you could speak to it,
Yeah.
and I know Linda could speak to it further, but go ahead, Al.
Sure, and certainly I'll defer to Linda. Please jump in when you feel necessary. Good evening, everyone. How we doing? I think the easiest way to answer your question, Jess, is just if you don't have an environment that's super safe, you have to make the environment that the child is in safe. So what that room provides is a space where you no longer have to control the environment. There's one provided for that student. And there's very specific, clear guidelines as far as how far you can go to transport a student to that space. So there may be times when the safest avenue may not be to use that room at all. It may be to have that student right there, given the guidelines as far as how far you can transport a student to that space. If a student utilizes the seclusion room, I get it, the space, how it looks in those pieces. There are very strict guidelines on how the rooms have to be pretty much constructed to make super safe, and the observation of a student in that room. A student's never left alone. There's multiple staff members. There's certain time parameters that you have to check and see and check with the student. So it's never a situation where a student is in, closed, and that's it. It's like a highly monitored situation, and it's not something that's just a quick go-to based on like this simple plan, like right away that's run off. It's usually based on a very structured plan And the primary driver all the time is safety to self or
Speak to
others.
frequency. I mean, you have seclusion rooms. Speak to frequency.
Yeah,
How
and
often is- how
we've
often
and
is
we've
a
had
student-
we've
How
had
often is a
freedoms.
student in a seclusion room at Hubbard? If you take
The sum total,
If you take 181 days, how often is there a student
sometimes not at all.
for a whole year?
There's some years not at all.
I was just curious to know
Um,
if all the schools were gonna have one.
Yeah.
Or if
I,
students who
I,
have this
I,
need.
I will say this as someone who's in the school every day with students with a range of learning and behavioral profiles. Having a room like that is an absolute benefit because what it does do is it helps the staff members who all have to be trained not put themselves in situations or a student in a situation that they don't need to be in because they have an environment that can take care of that for them. And then they can put the energy into what are our requirements within this
And I can
environment.
answer your question. Typically, we put seclusion rooms in when they're necessary based on the student population. So if we're having a difficult time with a student and we feel it's not safe or we can't create that safe environment, then we might construct a seclusion room to have, and then
Yeah.
we keep it at the school.
Brian, there's always been one at the 3 elementary school. We just had to relocate it.
Right,
Yeah.
but it also had to be redone. We're doing all new walls, and there has been times over the years, this goes back, where the rooms have become to a point where they can't be used because the student is that disruptive.
And not to get like too far down the line with it, but the use of the seclusion room, the amount of times you use it, you have to meet on those students. So it's not like you just run off a bunch of seclusions and just kind of going along your way. The staff, as well as the program, in essence, is held accountable for the use and the rationale. Every time that happens, specific reports are filled out, family within certain timelines, so you have to be very specific as to the why, the when, the frequency, and if any of those pieces, not that gets called into question, but you're using them at the level of frequency, you now have to meet and report and look at specific behavioral programming, for students with that. So it's a resource that's used probably on average extremely rarely, but you're thankful you have a space like that for a safety piece when it reaches that level. Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, sure.
No, it's important. It's important people
I'm just
know.
looking for clarification.
No, it's important people understand what they are and how they're used, because the optics could be to have a padded room.
You hear a
Wow.
seclusion room with
Right,
padding.
Right.
You
No,
can-
ask the question.
No.
You should.
No, that's a great question.
Brian, can I add two things? real
Please.
quick? So, two things. One, Griswold already had one, so this is just in a better spot for it. But two, I wanted to point out, so for Griswold this year, because we have Walter, our therapy dog, we have seen a drastic drop in the need to perform seclusions at Griswold, which I just wanted to give a shout out
very
to
good to
Walter
know.
because it's been amazing. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Great work, Walter. That's his name, Walter, right? Okay.
I didn't know that we had a seclusion room, so I learned something tonight, but also that
It makes sense to me if a child is having a moment, being disruptive, it's not fair to the other students, and it's not fair to the teacher if there's nowhere to resolve the issue. So in my opinion, it makes perfect sense, as long as it's done in, a humane fashion, which it sounds like it is, obviously. I don't think anybody here wants to hurt children in any way, shape, or form. So, if that's what needs to be done in order to keep things calm and running smooth, then it's fair to everyone, especially the other students who are, and the teacher who has to be interrupted, from the child having their moment. So I've heard a lot of stories, not in Berlin, but in other districts where, as you said, teachers have had things thrown at them, kids are climbing up the wall, throwing things at the teacher. I mean, you have to remove the student, you just have to, so.
One of my daughters was in a classroom where a kid was throwing desks, so,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's definitely
I
a
understand
safety concern.
yeah, exactly. And it's scary for the kids, too. It was like second or third grade.
Yeah.
Scary.
But it's even more disruptive than when the whole entire class has to be removed,
Mm-hmm.
because then all the kids are now talking about that.
There are like those guidelines, so just
Right.
because there's a room, you might say in here, well, how come you just don't, because that's the safest, you may not be able to move a student a
Right.
certain distance, so then that's your alternative, is that environment, so it's not, there's sometimes where you would wish that the room was right close for that safety, but you have to control it, so having that as a resource is helpful when you can, sometimes you work with a student, in their behavior plan, that it really depends on the individual student, the way that it's utilized. But you see some students that know if they need a break and they, you know what I mean, It's extremely regimented and detailed out. If you were to see staff and just what has to transpire in terms of the support and the documentation around it, it's never done haphazardly and very rarely on average.
What else do you want to say?
I just want to say that as much as it may not be out, we're not immune to some of those behaviors that you mentioned about students.
Right, I
It's
just
just,
didn't
no,
wanna say it
no,
without
it
having,
happens
you
here
know,
too.
data that
And that is
support it.
why the need for it, and it is
Sure.
done in a humane way. It's not, and as, it's based on what is the safest environment for the student, the other students, and the staff member. That's all.
All right, thank you everyone
Thank
for
you.
sharing about that. So, anything
Statement of
else from the facilities update? No? Okay, we're gonna move on to our next item, statement of need for Berlin High School track replacement, and, Ashley, you're gonna share about this? All right, we'll turn it back over to you.
So the Berlin High track replacement was put on the capital plan by a member of the grounds department, and the threshold to replace this track exceeds $1 million. So any kind of project that exceeds $1 million automatically goes to the Public Building Commission. And one of the things that starts with the Public Building Commission is the need for a statement of need, requirement for the board to vote on a statement of need. So I revised this morning. I removed some of the things that were in your original document from Thursday. That was posted on Thursday after I spoke with the ground superintendent. He made some changes. So why are we doing this? The primary reason why we're doing this is always safety. We've got the track has some areas of uneven surfaces and cracks. There are some worn out areas of the track, and then there's also some areas of the track that are showing poor drainage, which could cause slipping and other kinds of injury. The lifetime of the tracks are typically anywhere between 5 to 6 years, depending on the amount of use that they get. The life cycle of this particular track is exceeding its lifetime expectancy, so the purpose of this is to get it on the capital plan with full intention to have it replaced in year 2027. It does take a long time to get these kind of projects rolling, so this is why we're 2 years before an actual replacement or what we'd like to see. There's also some issues in the starting areas for the 100 meters. We've got some of the lanes that are worn down, and the starting blocks slip out of some of these areas. So the students or athletes, when they push off of some of these areas, sometimes they slip. So we want to resurface that, get the track surface ready to, offer the students the right type of environment. The other piece is there's delimitation. They're showing signs of delimitation, which is the material itself is starting to deteriorate. So that's your beginning signs that your track is reaching its end of life and needs to be replaced. So the purpose of today is to get that statement of need to the building commission. Estimates came in. We received 3 estimates from people that do this type of work. They start at $800,000. That was the lowest bid, and then the highest bid was $1.3 million. The project scope includes the demolition and site repair for anything that may be going on once they rip that track up, concrete curbing and drainage, asphalt paving, track surfacing, and track striping, restoration of the field event equipment, so that would be your long jump areas, your pole vault areas, and your shot put areas, fencing around the track, and then any lawn restoration, because as you know, with construction equipment, your lawn does get ripped up. So that would include that. Estimated timeline for a project this size is about 3 months, so it would have to start immediately after students are released for summer break, so it could be open and ready for the first day of school. So that's about it in regards to what the project entails, estimated cost, and why we're here.
Thank you, Ashley. So before we open it up to questions, do we have a motion for consideration?
I'll move to approve the statement of need for the track replacement Stokely Field located at Berlin High School and forward said statement of need to the town council for further consideration by the Public Building Commission.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So motion by Peter, second by Gina. Now any discussions, questions, or comments for Ashley?
So,
Oh, sorry.
No.
Go.
as we just got the new turf there, so how, hopefully that won't be
That
impacted
won't be
at
affected by,
all
yeah.
or damaged through this process.
It shouldn't be. That's
Yeah.
the intent.
But the track is outside.
The
of it.
track is on the
Yeah.
outside, yeah.
Okay.
So they would, part of that cost would be making sure that that area is secure from any kind of construction damage that may occur from doing the track.
And what kind of warranty does this come with?
They're typically 5-year warranties for your regular wear and tears.
Really?
Yeah. 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 And there, a lot of times, many of these warranties, they are very, very restricted. We see that at the turf over at Sage Park where, we have to have it fluffed.
Really?
If we don't get it, if we don't fluff the space, and I wish I could have a better technical term, but that's really what it's called. Then, if we don't do that annually, then we lose, then the warranty is voided. So similar type of restrictions to warranties will apply to this as well.
So essentially, you're saying that in 5 to 6 years, we have to revisit and spend another
Yeah,
potentially
typically.
$1 million
Well,
on
this is
another-
it. They do areas of resurfacing from time to time. This requires a full replacement because it's at that time.
So in the 5-year span, it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean a whole redo. It could
Correct. It could be
Okay.
just a it could be just a very small repair of certain areas. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? We can move to a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Did Jamie vote?
No, I don't know if she's on.
Sorry, I.
Okay. So, 9, opposed? Okay, let's vote one more time, I'm sorry. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The vote carries 9-0. All right, now for the fun stuff. We're gonna turn it over to the superintendent to present the proposed budget for 2025-2026. Well, we're gonna turn it over to everyone. We get to hear from everyone tonight.
Yes, with the new model of how you'd like the budget presented, you're gonna hear from each of the levels and the various budgets, and then we'll conclude with myself and Ashley giving an overview of the entire budget. But I'd like to start by thanking all the administrators that are here tonight for the budget, and ask the elementary principals to come forward for to kick this off tonight. But I'd like to share before they start with the presentation here. This budget that you're gonna hear, it's gonna be very abridged from the principals and from the athletic director, because there's really nothing but maintenance in the budget. So the reason why we used to do each school individually, and they would recommend new staff and various items, you're not gonna hear that from the staff, because that's not in the budget. So you're gonna hear what the necessities are. The directive for the budget was to look at what they needed without new staff. They'll suggest what they would have liked for new staff, but none of that is in the budget. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to the elementary principals, please.
I'm sure if this is.
What's that? You have in the budget, yes.
Thicker one?
There you go. We will be short but memorable.
That's my presentation, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with our operational budget request, and across the board for the elementaries, we're looking for nothing more than a slight increase to account for inflation. This would cover instructional materials, supplies, texts, consumables, things that we use every day to make sure that we continue instruction and keep the structure of the school running.
As far as staffing, we were asked to include those pieces that may not have made into the superintendent's budget, but that we requested. Some of these have been requested over a few years. Under instructional paraprofessionals, the focus there is kindergarten. Elementary schools do have kindergarten para support. Willard has 2 for 3 classes, Howard has 1 for 2 classes, and Griswold has 2 for 4 classes. So we were looking originally for an increase in that case support, because they are absolutely vital to the function of the classroom. Ideally, 1 per class would be great. They serve a range of functions that, again, are absolutely necessary to kindergarten functioning. We also requested, and again, this isn't a new request, over the past years, writing interventionists for Tier 2 and Tier 3 support. We currently have Tier 2 and 3 support in reading and math through our departments, but there is no outside Tier 1 support for writing specifically. So if you think of Tier 1 instruction, classroom instruction, Tier 2 is that additional support, small group, maybe 3 times a week, just to give you a reference. Tier 3 support would be more that 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 5 times a week. That does not exist in writing at the elementary level right now. Classroom teachers, with the support of some of the literacy professionals, and even our PPS staff for some other interventions, try to intervene in Tier 1 with that.
And then, you know, it's important at the elementary level, classroom size is always discussed. Initially, a classroom teacher to account for enrollment, as there's always variability in the enrollment from year to year. Some of the grade levels are getting a little bit bigger, and we never know exactly what kindergarten is going to be until late in the summer, and that always makes it challenging too.
Any questions? Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Next, we have the secondary principals.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening. So at McGee Middle School, I would first like to thank Mr. Constant for going through this collaborative process while I was anxiously awaiting my arrival at McGee. But taking a look at the lines, the team took a very conservative approach, and any increases are due to inflation on consumables. So making sure that, number one, they were fiscally responsible, but also that we had the materials provided to be successful in the classroom. One piece that was a request was towards our wellness program. We have a robust offering in a space that would rival most high school facilities across the state of Connecticut. So we want to ensure that we're not just chasing problems, but have a proactive approach to ensuring that students have access to safe equipment and can access all of that equipment all year. And then also to make sure that through instruction, we have an appropriate level of challenge. We've had success with the IXL in our math program, so we're piloting that in our 8th grade science program as well, and we would like to continue with that. And there are 0 positions requested for 25-26.
And for the high school? So similar to the middle school, we certainly have a conservative budget request this coming school year. We have some slight increases in funding due to inflations and consumables in the following areas: art, FCS, CTE, and music and school counseling. Again, mostly in regards to student products and things that they need on a day-to-day basis. Our career and technical education department, CTE, which you've recently heard a bunch about, is going through their rebranding process with some new courses, so some new equipment and technology is required to support student learning. Funds will also help sustain the development of our CNA, EMS, and firefighting courses. The following departments are remaining flat or slightly below the previous year's budget. I wanted to note that because that's the majority of our departments. And we also have 0 positions requested for next school year. Any questions?
Thank you both.
You're
Thank you.
Just like to refer to as, we have a curriculum instruction, CNI as we like to refer to it.
So the curriculum instruction budget obviously is there to fund all the curriculum additions, revisions, updates, any learning or materials that we need for those implementations, anything that we have from state mandates. We have to be able to fund for those implementations. Anytime there's a new course, those materials come through curriculum and instruction budget. And any professional learning that happens, whether it's for the board or any of the staff members, it happens through our budget. And software subscriptions for the teaching and learning side. So not Power School, but RazKids or Lexia at the elementary level.
So just to go a little further into detail about some of the categories, instructional supplies is what you think it would be. So some of our ESOL supplies, things to support classrooms,
our books and other supplies for summer reading. Tuition, this is one area we just quickly wanted to mention. We do have independent study in math. For instance, at the high school, there are some students who, usually a very small handful, who complete calculus with us and actually have room to then go on to a multivariable calc. And so they do it through an online opportunity where they work virtually and have a mentor teacher at the school who works with them, so we do have to pay for that. And then with our CNA program, when we first started having that at the school last year, we did have some state funding that covered the majority of our students, and that has unfortunately gone away, and we've had to continue to look for other resources, but at this point, we do need to recognize that we will most likely have to pay for the majority. And with the huge demand, we are hopeful to have a session in the fall as well as the spring semester. And then other certified salaries, that's all of our summer curriculum writing for any updates to programs and new programs, curriculum across the district, and then teachers leading professional learning. So for instance, when we do our November Choice PD Day, we offer multiple sessions through the day, and we have a lot of staff with incredible expertise. They run technology sessions, curriculum sessions, all different types of things, and we do pay them a small amount for their prep because they do that outside of school time.
In teaching and learning software, that again is the instructional software for the district, so anything that runs the libraries, other curricular areas, math, anything that's done throughout the entire district. If it's something that's specific to a course, that's done through the school. And like everything else in our world, large increases because of the amount that they're charging us now. And then we have in-district and out-of-district PD, so that's based, the differentiation is when professional learning comes to us, we hire a consultant, we tell them what they want, they come here, that would be in-district professional learning, and then if a teacher says, hey, I'm interested in learning this, I'm gonna go to a conference, that would be out-of-district professional learning.
And then lastly, we have a few other categories, staff travel. So we do have some staff in the district who travel building to building, whether they are split or have a leadership role where they do have to regularly go place to place. And then if people are attending an out-of-district professional development opportunity, we do pay mileage for that. Non-instructional supplies, those are various materials for different meetings and things that we host. And then admin supplies would be for professional learning, curriculum updates. Often it's books to support new learning of our staff. Art around town, our district art show, which you know is held at the New Britain Museum of Art. We support that through this budget. And then our kindergarten orientation and welcome, we have a variety of resources for families and things that are provided. So, nothing new for that.
When we look at textbooks, we're talking this year, 8th grade Spanish is wanting to implement some new text, so they're going to be doing that for next year. And then obviously the big one is the reading program. We also have authors that come in to visit within the district, so we fund that. Dues and fees for professional organizations and field trips. So those are things like second graders go to the library. The transition between the elementary and middle school, so to go see what the middle school's doing. Between the middle and high school, they went to a STEAM visit recently. So all of those are and it's basically transportation, obviously, that we fund, and sometimes schools can walk depending on which school it is. All right. Thank you.
Questions? Good. Any questions? PBS.
Special education budget? Just pull one more chair over Michelle so you can see. Thank you.
Hello. So the special ed budget, again, the purpose of this budget is to support the learning and social emotional needs of our students with individual education plans, and that starts at age 3 and may go all the way to age 22. So in the special ed budget, it looks at the certified and non-certified staff, which also includes benefits, instructional supplies, contracted services, equipment, tuition and transportation, which is a big part of our budget, the Central Connecticut Transition Academy, and extended school year services, which is summer school for students on IEPs. Every year, I always say that special ed budget is like a moving target because students are constantly coming into services or being dismissed, so it's so hard to project. Our kids move into our district, and they require significant amount of services, just so hard to plan for because you just never know who's coming and going. And some of them are pretty high price tags. If a student moves in and is already in an out-of-district program for $90,000, boom, that becomes our responsibility. So that's why it's hard to plan for. Nope, the other way. The other way. Brian always reminds me, special ed is a significant amount of our general budget. So right now, we're a little over 13 and a half, which is approximately 24.2% of our overall budget. And that's every district, no matter where you go. The special ed budget is a significant part of any district's budget. This graph really just depicts how our numbers are broken down. In district on October 1, we had 416 students that we were servicing with IEPs. Here's the moving target that I could tell you. As of January 1, we're up to 431 students. So we had a lot of students tested, and they were found eligible for special education services. And it'll probably go up before the end of the year. So that's where that's the biggest number. Out-of-district placements at October 1 were 24. We're projected, I think, to have 22 for next year. Magnet schools and BOAG schools, so these are just students that are on IEPs. We have 4 right now. So not in addition to having to pay the tuition like any other student without an IEP, if they need counseling, if they need speech and language services, their special ed teacher services, those are additional tuitions that we need to budget for. Service plans are students that attend St. Paul's. So we're responsible to provide services for those students. That is paid out of our grant, but if we have to evaluate the students, that comes out of our regular budget. And then students are hospitalized or maybe in detention facilities. If they are in the hospital or in a detention facility for over 10 days, then they bill us for tutoring services. And again, this is for general ed students as well as students with IEPs. And that varies every year. Special education programs for unique needs. So we do have a number of specialized programs that we think keeps students in our district. If we were to have to outplace any of those students, I just added that number to the right. All of these programs require a high student-to-teacher ratio, so many of these programs have paraprofessionals attached to some of these kids, just again because they need that specialized instruction. The students in our SNAP and SOAR program, those are our students more with social emotional needs, so they may receive counseling from ESS, or they may receive counseling from our psychologists and social workers. And then our Central Transition Academy is split 50% with Cromwell and Berlin, so that's a combined program which has worked out very well, and that's located down at the Y building downtown. And again, if we had to outplace, this is just the tuition range right now that we are paying for some students that are outplaced. So the students in our BLAST program at Willard and McGee, these are our students that some of them are nonverbal. They just need significant amounts. Some students have a hard time with social emotional regulation. So that's the range of tuitions right now that we are paying for students that we cannot program for in our school right now. The RISE kids are also students with intellectual disabilities, and it's the same tuition. More of our social, emotional, behavioral students, or our transition students, that would be the range for tuition and transportation. So we're keeping a lot of kids in district, which is helping to support their growth and development and our budget. So again, just to break down a little bit, the special ed budget. So the contracted services, again, it's not just for special education students, it's for everybody. But what falls under there is our ESS services at high school and middle school, outside evaluators, interpreter services. Those services have gone up significantly over the years. So some of our families do not understand or speak English, so we will call them in for PPTs or conferences or just typical meetings that administrators or teachers need to communicate with families. Field trips, nursing services, hearing impaired services, our Medicaid is CompuClaim, legal services, assistive technology, PMT that we talked about. Just like everyone else, we all need supplies for our related service people, so our occupational therapists, our physical therapists, our speech and language, our special ed teachers, testing materials, rewards, books, fidgets, and then equipment. So those are for our really significant students that may need adaptive seating or chairs or motor, that have motor needs. And here's the big number, special ed tuition. So, like I said, we're projected to have 21 students attending out-of-district placements next school year, and there's our tuition range. It goes from $83,000 to $236, and then transportation is broken down from anywhere from $23 to $64. And we have some unanticipated and anticipated tuitions in there. We also have to account for magnet schools, so next year.
Can I stop for just one
Yep.
sec? I just want to draw the board's attention to one thing. Looking at those ranges, the lowest range for tuition at $83,000, the lowest range for transportation, $20,000. So at a minimum, any student who's not educated in Berlin is $100,000.
And we really don't have much of a choice if they
yes.
have to get outplaced.
Yes. And, and hence a credit to Linda and her team for the various programs that she just showed you that keeps the students in district, where most parents would want their children educated anyways, not taking a 35 to 45-minute ride or even more to an outside facility. So having those programs and staffing them is important. It's not that we're staffing with an overabundance of certified teachers. A lot of times it's paraprofessionals that make up the difference in our staff with those students. So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, that's okay. In magnet schools next year, we're projecting 2 students that will attend magnet schools, and that's their tuition range right there in addition. So our projected out-of-district cost is the local budget, a little over $2 million, because excess costs, and Ashley could talk about this a little bit too. We're hearing from the state, we planned for 88% reimbursement. It may be much lower than that, and they're just telling us that this now. So we may have to make up the shortfall in that. So excess cost is 4.5 times our per pupil cost. So right now we're at $21,719. So anything over $97,735 of those tuitions, they will reimburse us 88%. Of those tuitions.
We hope it's 88%.
I don't think it's going to be 88%, but
No.
we don't know. But that's what they did in the past.
Yes.
So. And then our requests for this year, again, the unanticipated tuitions, and then the increase in supplies and field trips just because of inflation. We did ask for a full-time BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst. Allie's drowning right now with all of our students, but we could not support that in this budget. And then 6 paraprofessionals just because of students moving from preschool to BLAST. And those weren't supported either, so we'll see how we do. next year. But any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the district nod-wide instructional programs. So we have Craig Samansky, Director of Technology, and Ashley, Ashley and Dave, if you want to come up, you're going to do athletics right after, so. As soon as Craig gets done, Dave can fill the seat.
Yeah, it's been about 5 years in this, and when I started, we had one fund in my department, which was just for software infrastructure needs. We have hardware needs, and this is just, the major one is coming up this year is the firewall at the board office, which we replaced in 18-19, so we're hoping to get money for that. If not, hopefully there'll be some year-end savings which we can apply, but that would be what that's about there. And it's a good chunk of change. I'm anticipating it to be about 10 to 15 grand more than we paid last time. Tariffs, et cetera.
How many years ago, Craig, did we replace it?
18-19, it's end of life support is 2026 May, so kind of has to happen for that. And this is software that kind of came in. We haven't really been tracking it separately from everything, and this really reflects, like if you look at the red, how much companies really add their percentage increases each year, which we need to offset with year-end savings as well. So we've had a lot of stern emails to companies just saying, hey, what's it going to be the next few years, and can we lock into something? And most will, but some don't, and some just kind of will go way up.
So before we move on from this graph, typically end-of-year funds are allocated specifically for our technology department because we don't have a proper replacement cycle. So when we have surplus, which is often perceived as a terrible, awful thing, we use that surplus to fund our technology and our software programs. Typically what happens is at the end of every year there is going to be a surplus. It's just the way your budget goes. I don't think anybody here intentionally brings their monthly budget to a flat zero or in the red, because that's just poor planning. So surplus reasons could be staff being unable to fill staffing positions, some contracts coming in lower after the budget has been set, strategically looking at how we are doing certain things within the district, engaging in contracts that offer us cost savings. And one of the things that we do take advantage of in our technology budget and our software budgets is multi-year contracts. But one of the things that gets thrown around quite a bit is our ask is more than our actual need. And as you could see, what we are budgeted, what we ask for, and what our actuals are always more than what we get budgeted, and typically higher than what we anticipate based on the feedback we get from some software companies. So the perception that we are over asking, I think the proof is in the pudding here. We started tracking this kind of information a few years ago, and we're going to continue to track it just so people can see that we're not over asking when it comes to technology.
I have a quick question or statement. I don't know if this is for you guys or when Brian answers. I was just reading and talking to my husband because he does a lot of purchasing of stuff. It's expected that laptops for next year is supposed to increase around 70%. So is that being taken into consideration? So a year from now, they're saying laptops, one example, 70% increase due to tariffs. And then, my husband's anticipating that too, but it doesn't matter with his clientele. So what are you guys doing with this budget to prepare for that? Because I know we don't have a replacement cycle.
Yep, so Craig has put together.
It's not in our budget. The replacement cycle is not in our budget.
Correct. So I think the next slide is our actual equipment, correct? And Craig could go into what we've done to prepare as best we can with the technology within our classroom.
Well, this is kind of reflects the age of computers.
Yeah.
Based, and generally laptops. I have a fleet of about 500 like full-time staff laptops. Try and replace 20% of those a year, so like 100 if we can get them. Some years it doesn't happen. If, like I said, it's just year-end savings, what funds are available at the end of the year. A couple of years, maybe only got 50. Maybe I got 150 a few years back, so it varies.
And their laptops, they usually have for 5 years?
Yeah.
Okay, which is a pretty long time to have a laptop if you're using it daily.
When the upper age of that, like the 6 years and on, those are actually older laptops which we've repurposed using Chrome. So they're like a MacBook with running like a Chromebook interface, so they don't have high needs. They're great for paraprofessionals and other staff that need to read their emails and just kind of get into whatever systems we have them use on a daily. So it's so that's been the approach, but if a 70% increase, it's just it's gonna be like it'll be hard.
Then like any hardware and networking infrastructure that we're gonna need is also it projects it to increase significantly, so.
Yeah.
So can you just talk a moment about what happens, because we don't have a technology replacement cycle, the end of the budget year comes, we look at what surplus we have, Craig and Ashley sit down, they'll share it with me, here's what we wanted all year, what's the priority, they'll reprioritize. Student devices, we replace them usually at the 6th grade level with the Chromebooks, they last through middle school, we replace the Chromebooks at 9th grade level, and then we look at infrastructure as far as hardware and things that we need within the district. So the firewall, what's a priority? And then whatever funds we have, we use for those. And as Craig said, if we don't have enough, it's only 50 laptops that we purchased that year, even though we really had scheduled to purchase 100. So that document is shared with the board at the end. It shows exactly where the end of the year money comes in. And the reason why we're really focused on this is typically what we'll hear from the Board of Finance and things is you had X amount of dollars left at the end of the year. You didn't budget well, you could have budgeted more. And they're right, there is X amount left, but we keep saying it's used for technology because we didn't have it in the budget because it didn't allow us to. And that's gone on for years. It's not something new that we're doing.
Well, and it's only usually within 1%, so we're not having like a major surplus.
No, it's usually between 1% and 2%, right, absolutely.
Right, so we don't have a significant percent, but,
So last year, or for the end of year funds for the fiscal year 2024, the priority was classroom projectors because several of them were reaching end of life. So we probably bought, 30 to be replaced within the district, which is amazing that we were able to do that because typically when it comes to classroom projectors, we're lucky if we get 10. So with the help of the end of year funds, we were to get 30 new classrooms in addition to our one-to-one technology for our 6, 9, and I believe iPads for our 2nd grade, if that's correct, right?
Yeah,
it was at the 2nd grade. So we were able to fulfill that with end of year funds. And historically, we have not been able to buy that much technology. But we were very fortunate.
Also, all the Office PCs.
And the Office PCs
only
came
able to run Windows 10 were replaced. Yeah.
how many projectors do you anticipate that need to be replaced within the next 2 years? Oh, okay. Because that's going to be another thing, like even the bulbs that are going, everything is going to go up if the tariffs go through.
That red line is like the high school's projectors, which were put in during the renovation in 2014. So and we do have more to go in over there because.
While we're on the subject of the high school, an argument you often hear throughout this entire season is that it is a brand new building. It may seem like it is a brand new building, but that building is 10 years old. So we are approaching a maintenance cycle at the high school. So when you hear the argument of it's a brand new building, please keep it in the back of your mind. It is a 10-year-old building approaching its maintenance.
Yeah. And we've heard my techs have heard a lot of rumbling from teachers like, hey, the projector's not as bright as it
Oh, I
used to
know.
be, and,
It's-
so we're into.
And then it gets blurry, it's not as bright, it doesn't connect
Gets
as
to
well.
that point, I'm gonna just, hopefully I can buy something and replace it, but, and a lot of the problem with like using the year-end savings, these things take months to come in. By the time they come in, school's starting and I don't have, facilities doesn't have a chance to install them before the start of the year, and they're working overtime on the weekends, and it's really more of a burden on that department as well, who really would, if I were able to get these things into the, the district by the end of June, you're looking at your savings and what's left over, then it's really hard to make the purchase, like maybe now before the tariffs start, or other things, so. That's,
What happens to old computers and devices? Is there a type of buyback plan, or is there any way to get any kind of?
There have been buybacks, but for some devices, but they're generally, we use them so long, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Like when I take a MacBook and we give it another 2, 3 years because we turn it into a Chromebook. When I talk to recycling companies, they're like, yeah, you can pay us and we'll take it per pound. So.
So you can't, like, is it defragment thing where they take everything out and then you can't reuse them? I'm just asking, I don't know, I mean.
If it's unusable, then it would just be recycled with, electronic disposal. But we have been able to get some buyback, maybe like we've had a cycle of iPads, we're able to get some, but they'll give you like $30, it's
So
not.
the materials just go where? Do they get stored somewhere at the school, or do they get
We
thrown out?
store
We
parts.
try, we'll take some of the old equipment and do what we can for parts. We don't have to buy parts, but we typically have them recycled. So the information is removed, and they go through an electronic recycling
Town Farm
program.
Lane has an electronic recycling bin, which a lot of our stuff will go to.
Yeah.
Which is a long time if you're using it, because, so, my husband works in, like, he basically does this, but with corporate, less than 2 years, they have new laptops, and then his company will also take them to recycle. Like, brand new iPads, brand new laptops, like, these things don't even look used compared to I just got a new laptop because it was at 3.5 year mark, and it was not even working. I use it every day. I'm on it. Yeah, but the point is, like, it doesn't matter if it's an Apple, because the discount rate the district gets, like, when you're buying them in that bulk, it doesn't matter if it's Apple or, like, PC, but, I happen.
It sounds like it's the biggest, the takeaway for me is the using the funds at the end. Technology is a big piece.
Yeah.
And obviously special ed, like Linda said, she just doesn't have that gauge to know what she's gonna need with people moving in and out. So those are like the two big moving pieces that seem, as I'm
Yeah, if
hearing
we
the
were
budget
willing to give our
overall.
laptops up at 3 to 4 years to someone who would buy them back and give us cash, then,
Right, why wouldn't you?
But then you're
we're not-
losing money, like, in the corporate world, they can do that, they can afford that, but I think it's smart that you stretch them out and then repurpose them, it gets more out of your dollar, but I think the approach we've been taking is, it's not the most strategic, but it's allowed us to not have to add it into the operational. Cause I think the other side is, now you guys are just gonna put this in the operational budget, and it's just gonna drive it up, like most districts do. Most districts have
Well,
this.
it is a driving factor.
It
in
is,
the
and
budget.
it's
I mean, obviously,
necessary,
you're-
like.
You're admitting that you need that money at the end of the year. If there's $500,000,
Right.
it's going to technology. I mean, that's.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I'm not disputing it. It's just that's a need, because the turnaround with technology is so quick. You just can't keep up with it. That's the big factor that I see, having done this now, I don't know how many cycles.
So what we have done in the past, especially in the superintendent's budget, is we do put our technology needs in the superintendent's budget, and in the Board of Education. It usually gets adopted by the Board of Education, and it is always the first line of cuts when we get the revised number from the Board of Finance of the Town Council, because it is significant number.
It's
But
red
yes,
flags it,
yeah, but it is, we're here to tell you what we need and to tell you how important technology is, and you just have to put the numbers, because it is a real driver in the budget.
So can I just ask something? It's a clarification, I think. With the technology, I know like the Chromebooks, you said 6th grade gets it and it continues with them until basically, right? High
Until they
school?
start ninth grade. then
Until they
get-
start
then
ninth,
they-
and then they, okay.
So life is 3 years, and then we get 4 years out of the high school students.
So what is the technology ratio for elementary? Does elementary,
Everyone's 1-to-1. So if a Chromebook goes through 6 through 8, in 8th grade, those will go through the devices, and a portion of them will be held on as like kind of loaners and spares, but we'll also use those and send them down to the elementary to replace even older Chromebooks. And the ones at the elementaries don't suffer a lot of damage because they're in carts, they don't go home, and there's a cart in every classroom.
yeah,
So we'll use the technology from 8th grade and 12th grade when the seniors graduate. We'll go through those, take the best ones of the same kind, and put them in a grade level, and just kind of some of the Chromebooks, like we got rid of stuff that we bought back in 2019 this past summer by doing that. So we're just kind of cycle things through. So the elementaries will get the 3-year older Chromebooks, kind of is where they are, and that meets their needs. They don't have as far as like the
I know.
higher end
It's-
stuff.
I think, I mean, it might just also just be my personal take, because I was a little thrown back when my child first started school. He's a 3rd grader now, but in kindergarten. And when they said during the orientation that they use the technology in kindergarten, I totally get it. You get resources, things are educational, it's still technology. I think having a full set in every classroom, I'm not saying that they're not being used or the benefits of them being used. I'm just saying that's a lot of pieces of technology, 1-to-1 per kid to be used, and obviously that drives up numbers too. I mean, personally, I don't think they should even be in the lower grades, but I understand the access of what they can provide. I'm just thinking, like I said, technology is a money driver. And to have a full set in every classroom of every elementary school.
Well, they're not the new ones, they're like the ones that would just get sent off to be recycled.
Yeah, understand, still there.
So the board adopted the 1-to-1 technology several years ago. So K through 3 have iPads, and several of their K through 2 have the iPads, and several of their applications they're required. So that's the tools they're using in the classroom for certain types of curriculum. And then the 3 through 12 have the Chromebooks, and that's where we've kind of ended up with the 1-to-1 technology. So it was just.
So if I could just speak to technology in general in the district. Berlin's technology use by students and staff, I will put up against any district in the state of Connecticut. It's phenomenal. Now we have the tech people, Craig's group, tech integration specialist, and we have the devices. And so when we formed a tech committee, which had board members years ago, and staff and teachers on it, it was creating that complete cycle where you had the technology, you had the connectivity, the availability of technology was continuous, meaning there's enough for every student, no one was excluded. And then you had tech integration staff working with students and staff to build capacity of both students and staff, that the technology would be integrated into the classroom in the normal functioning of the curriculum. So it wouldn't be that students would go to a tech classroom and learn technology. It would be hands-on and ready and available to them. So that was the position of the board at that time, and that was the rationale of why we had the technology. Yes, there is a cost to it, but I think that looking at any profession, whether it's college or career readiness, technology plays a role in everyone's life. It does, and having the knowledge and the usability of it only increases a person's capacity to be able to do what they need to do in their job or career. So that was always the position of the board and why we were 1-to-1. I mean, regardless of during COVID, because we had that position, what we're able to do compared to other districts was also great too. So, not that I ever want to go back to that again, but having that was definitely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, this one looks funny in 21-22 because the state actually bought us 500 Chromebooks, and you know, which I had asked for in the budget, but we didn't need obviously
Right,
that year.
because the state tried to help other districts that weren't.
Yeah,
Right.
but we've, you know, consistently, you know, we get about 50 grand and spend, you know, around two, a little under two, on 6th and 9th grade. When you get the cases, licensing, the Chromebook, they add up, yeah. Are we?
I think that's it for you. Any questions?
Yes.
Thank you.
No. You're welcome.
This is also me.
Yeah, we need Dave to come to athletics. You do athletics
Sure.
after?
Do you want to do athletics first?
Yeah. Do you want to do athletics, Dave, or?
Whatever you like.
I want to do athletics. I'll do building a site capital, and then the overview.
David was supposed to be first.
I think I just have two slides really quickly.
There we go.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me up here just for a couple of minutes to talk about our athletic budget. There's a process with each coach, head coach that I talk about. We kind of talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Necessities is tier 1, obviously. Tier 2, enhance the program, and 3 are really things that they wish they'd have to enhance the program. Everything that we're doing, I actually talked about the resurfacing of the track. Everything that we do at the high school and middle school is to make sure that the kids are student athletes, that they're doing well in their studies, and secondly, making sure we have a safe and secure environment for them so they can compete, obviously at the middle school level, freshman levels, JV level, and obviously the varsity level. When taking a look at everything, one big thing to note, and I know Brian and Ashley will talk about this in their presentations a little bit, but we were, over the last amount of years up until recently, we went with select therapy for an AT, an athletic trainer. That cost, and there's articles across the state. CT Insider just provided an article earlier in January. Thank you for that. But the cost is significantly going to change for an athletic trainer. Typically, the cost that we've been paying has been between 40 and 50 grand over the last 7 or 8 years. Our trainer knows our community. She's unbelievable. Adrian, give her a shout out right now. But she is actually unbelievable, has the best interests in not only our community, but the kids in the athletic realm. And what's transpiring in our state is that these students that are graduating with their athletic trainer degree, they're not able to, the article gets into a lot of specifics, but they're not even able to pay off their student loans with the amount of salary that they're getting. So a lot of places like Select Therapy has seen a huge loss in their ATs because districts over the last year or so are starting to have these athletic trainers be Board of Education employees. After conversations with Brian and Ashley, I was trying to be ahead of the curve with the scenario that we had with our trainer and move in that direction. So thank you for that. That was a conversation that we had earlier in the year. But that's going to be obviously a little slight increase from where we were in previous years. Our overall budget, you've heard it from obviously all the principals here. There definitely is a cost in expendable items. As an example, was paying $95 to $100 a box for 12 baseballs, and now that cost exceeds close to $120. So that's just a quick little snapshot of kind of where I'm at with expendable items for our budget at the high school. So the 2.74% increase is really trying to get back some of the items that were taken out of the budget in previous years, and also just slight increases in those particular avenues. McGee Athletics overall, there's a slight increase in transportation. The overall budget that we've created, and after talking to coaches, is going to be a slight increase of $3,500, and that's going to be geared towards girls basketball and soccer uniforms. So, you know, after talking with the coaches and talking with with the appropriate services that we have as well, I feel that this budget is sound, it's fiscally smart, and, you know, if you do have any questions as we go through the process, even after tonight, please feel free to reach out to me, and I definitely could answer some more questions if you don't have any tonight.
I can forward everyone that article that, you know, I found about the athletic trainer. I just looked at my email and I don't even see it there, so, but I was really happy to see that come out after we talked about putting the trainer on our payroll, because basically they're making under a living wage, and it's not comparable to any other thing you have to go to school for to obtain state licensure for, any other career. And it's, districts are going to start seeing an increase of that, so we were actually ahead on that. And it, you know, I was pretty happy to know that you guys are proactive in that approach.
Really, thank you to the board for allowing us to
Yeah.
move in that direction earlier this year, because we realize there's additional funding, but Adrian's been with us over 5 years, respected by the students, respected by the student athletes, respected by the parents. And now, based on the need of other districts, we're fortunate to have someone who enjoys working in Berlin and has done a fantastic job for the community. So thank you to all of you for allowing us to move there. It leaves us without being in the position of where other districts are. So thank you.
Nice job.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay. So the priority capital request, this is something that is due to the town council and the, just the town council and the Board of Finance in November. So this is something that you guys saw in your October meeting, so this is kind of just a recap. So the F&O committee, we met in October, went over all of the capital requests that came through and facility requests that came through from all of our buildings and our department heads, our building principals and department heads. And we prioritized these 3 projects for the capital plan, which are the McGee Science Labs, the renovation of all elementary lavatories, and the renovation of the McGee Auditorium. So all of these projects are in the very beginning stages. The 2 on the bottom, the renovation of the lavatories and the McGee Auditorium, we don't even have conceptual estimates on those yet. The renovation of the 5 science labs are currently at the PVC right now, and it is, what's the next step with that is I have to create an RFP for architectural services for that particular space. So that will be coming in the next few weeks.
Can you just explain what an RFP is for those who might
Oh,
not
it's
know?
a request for proposal. So what we have to do is we have to go out to bid essentially, and it is, what we're looking for is architectural services to help us through this design and repurpose and remodel of the science classrooms. That $3.1 million that you see there is a conceptual design estimate, so that is soup to nuts, ceilings to floors, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And the hope is, if once we get an architectural firm in there, look at the space, evaluate existing conditions, and what we'd like to see in a new lab, that number will come down. So that's the purpose of bidding out for a architectural services there. Due to the nature of the other 2 projects on this list, you're likely to see a similar type of progression on those projects as well.
Just one comment. It's not on the list at this point, but I did see him in my update, and you'll see further. It's been ongoing since last year. I did tour with one of the Board of Finance members and the mayor. There are issues at the high school with the floor, and they're pervasive throughout the school. The floors are actually deteriorating and bleeding through. And it's not just in one area, it's in classrooms and so on. I'm sure that'll be a priority on the capital list at some point. But those are 4 major areas that will need capital improvement over the years, which substantial funding will be required to fix.
So when we go into each individual school, we look at the just some things that have been requested by the building principals. We're looking for access controls in certain areas of the gym for reverse evacuations. That floor tile replacement is just a very rough estimate, but as Brian had said, that condition is getting worse. That is also at the PVC right now. We are waiting on a study to come back from samples that they have sent out, so more to follow on that. Window and blind replacements, the security issues with that, and then the room number remodeling system. I don't know how many of you have actually been at BHS and have taken a tour of BHS, but if you are not somebody that is in there every single day, it is very hard to navigate those hallways because the numbering system just doesn't make sense.
The logic is,
And everybody questions, is it really that much to slap some new signs on windows? But it's more than that, because it goes all the way down to the architectural designs and making sure that room 120 is room 120 on not only the school map, but on the firefighters map, on anybody that needs that particular thing. It also requires different types of networking through as well. McGee Middle School, you see a lot of this that year after year. It's the same stuff. If we had a bottom list pit of money, we would love to see a lot of these things come off, but lockers repairs, several of the lockers at McGee Middle School, they no longer open, they're kicked in, damaged. We get a vendor in there every summer to do what they can, but it's at the point where they need to be replaced. Another dream we have over at McGee Middle School is a path to the athletic field. So if you want to attend a softball or a baseball game or even a soccer game, it's very, and if you're in a wheelchair or you have mobility issues, it's very difficult to get there because there's no paved way of getting there. So you have to kind of trudge through the grass, and when it's so wet and soggy, it makes it very difficult for people with disabilities. So we would really like to see that become a little bit more accessible for our, not only our students and the McGee community, but for the community as a whole. As you know, Parks and Rec uses that space as well. Outdoor lighting is always a priority for any of our buildings, primarily for safety. Curbing replacements, some of the curbs are starting to deteriorate. This was submitted by the former principal, and he always wanted to kind of make a pathway from the main office into one of the other hallways. So that's what that cut out a wall and make a more even flow. And then painting, and then obviously the vestibule areas, we'd like to see that be, there's certain areas in the vestibule that require a key. Having access controls will make it a little easier for people in that building. Griswold, we have many of the same things. Some of these, can potentially, if we have a certain amount of end of year funds that don't have to be allocated towards technology, could probably come off of this list. I would say Griswold's, all of these prices are to be determined, but they're relatively smaller projects that we would move forward on if we have storage, if we have funding available. Hubbard, a lot of the same requests on Hubbard as well. You see the cafeteria flooring, ceiling tiles, library, media center. Thing with Hubbard and also Griswold, because of the HVAC renovations that are pending for the next 18 months, some of these projects will automatically go on hold because you're not going to add an additional construction project to a very significant project. But some of these also lower limit things that if we can, and if we have funding available, we would potentially do this on our own with end of year funds. And that's it for site, building, and capital. Any questions?
I think it's important to explain that site, building, and capital. And actually, if you want to do it's fine. Where the funds come from in the town side and how they get allocated. Can you just
Sure. So these projects and this funding is not in the superintendent or in the Board of Ed budget. It goes upstairs to the town budget or the 61 budget, and it's typically funded. Well, what has been funded in the past is they've used town surplus to fund some of these in the past, but a lot of these projects do require certain grant funds, or they require bonding or things like that. So we try to get them into the capital plan. We put that in the original budget for the overall, and a lot of times capital requests get removed from the Board of Finance, and then whatever they could fund with end-of-year surplus, they chip off the smaller projects. The large projects are the ones that go out for bond, and we try to get grants if they're available.
And the threshold for capital used to be at 10,000. It was changed last year to 25,000. What that really does is that means that anything below 25,000 needs to go into the operational budget. Anything 25,000 above goes into capital. So what that would do essentially is, you know, if you're getting 3% and now you would have put that $12,000 item into the capital, it now has to go on the operational. Which there's some to say that that's the correct move because of inflation. I don't know if it's a $25,000, you know, target, but that's where things are. So I just think it's important for the board to know this is not in the operational budget, these items. They're discussed with the town. You good? Any questions on building and site or capital request? Okay. The superintendent's budget as the finale here, to hopefully tie all these pieces together. First, thank you for the opportunity to present the budget. I can say that many of the administrators put a lot of time and effort into this budget, especially Ashley and Tracy, helping to construct and lay out the budget in a meaningful way to you. As we go through the budget, I think the most important thing to impress upon you is that where the number that you're gonna see momentarily, as you flip through already and saw the number, that number, as you saw, the elementary principals come before you, the secondary principals, there's no new staff, there's really no new request. So when you look at that number, when I get done sharing with you, and Ash and I get done sharing, that number essentially is moving forward with what's state mandated and the contractual obligations with insurance and so on. There's nothing new or, you know, moving forward even to attain that number. And I wanna say that without getting a substantially higher number than what we received last year and the previous years, there will need to be many cuts to staff and programs to maintain. There's not a lot of places to go. Obviously, it'll be part of the discussion. That's what was tonight with technology. That's where to cut some of it, but that's still not gonna shore up the percentage. And I hope by the end, you'll see what I'm talking about. So with that, if we could just go ahead. First slide, the goals. Our number one goal, which the other four goals follow below, is provide a quality education. Obviously, that's subjective to what quality, but as an educator and what people have come to expect from the Berlin Public Schools, it's to maintain that integrity, which is to prepare students for multiple options and opportunities. I think you know that we spent a lot of time talking about what courses, class sizes, the career and college readiness, whatever path you're choosing, that students are prepared for multiple options and opportunities. The maintaining class sizes and course offerings, that we do offer varied courses at the high school that allow students to take a multitude of courses, and that the class sizes at the elementary are what people have come to expect from Berlin Public Schools to remain consistent. Support staff, students, and classroom technology. The work environment that we provide to staff in where the state of hiring and retaining high-quality staff, we've been very fortunate. You heard me say numerous times, the sustainability to attract and retain high-quality staff makes the largest difference with student achievement, and we've managed to do that, providing an excellent work environment with professional development, with the proper technology, to retain and to attract staff from other districts. And the commitment to safety, I think you see throughout, there's always been a commitment to safety that, you know, whether it's the safety director, whether it's putting in new initiatives. We had our safety forum last year. I think that it definitely showed that we have a lot of safety precautions, not to say that we have everything as compared to other districts, and we continue to look to create things safe. I think that you'll see that some of the proposals John Schmaltz has had for safety that we'll be sharing with the mayor moving forward is only to ensure the safety of students and staff. So with those 5 goal areas. Our mission and core value to empower our students to be enthusiastic, curious learners, and kind, compassionate leaders in the community and the world. That's just the overall where we want students to be, and we hope that moving through their K-12 experience in Berlin that we're imparting that on them. The purpose, the passion, and pride, our tagline. You can read underneath what that means, but it's definitely our tagline, and I think there is a lot of pride that goes into the work, and I think that's with the community as well as with the teachers and with the students. I think it fits the district well. And just how do we build a foundation of what we believe about learning? And, you know, the fact that all students learn when they feel safe, included, respected, and valued by their community. I think that we've had experiences where we've had staff members that maybe were new to the district that didn't impart on those values and things. And I know conversations with many of you, and obviously there were conversations with you as community members and parents. It was happening with other staff, that we have a standard that we expect people to act and how to treat people, and we need to maintain that. We must believe in, challenge, and support all students to reach their personal goals and our high expectations. The expectation that no student should come to school for 181 days and not improve against their personal goals, and that they should definitely be moving forward. Learning is enhanced by a cycle that includes goal setting, practice, and feedback and reflection. That students know where their goals are, that teachers work with them on reaching those goals, and they're giving feedback along the way to help them to move forward. And students are empowered and engaged by choice and authentic learning experiences. I think some of our work that we've done with career education, various courses, the course rebranding at the high school, some of the things that we've taken on the last few years definitely help to support that. Just a little bit of our Berlin vision of a graduate. You can see the tags that this is created by a student. You can see this across the district. You can see within our curriculum. You've had presentations on it. It's kind of the backbone of where we're going with what we expect students to do and be able to do but upon graduation. It doesn't start just in 12th grade. It's integrated throughout the curriculum, and we hope to see it becomes more of a backdrop of what all staff members impart on students. Projections. So I didn't put this into it. I did do a 5-year look back and said, how accurate are our projections? We pay for what's called the Peter Prada report, and we look at the NESDAQ report, and we try to project what our enrollment will be. So you can look essentially at the elementary school. We're projected for no change, a net of -1. So we could call that no change at the elementary for next year. And if you look at the secondary, projected for a change of 56. So I looked back the last 5 years and said, how accurate is our projection versus actuals? And one year we were 36 below the projection. The next year we were 34 above the projection. The next year we were 1 above it. So there's really no, but what I can say as a backdrop to this is we have a document, and I'm willing to share with the board, that we put together from the town. There are over 500 units, rental units, that are coming online, have started to come online in town. And some are 2-bedroom, some are 1-bedroom, but with those 500, I'd be hard pressed to think that none of them will have any students that will be moving into town. But, you know, and they're coming on in various times. So we can look and say, yes, we're projected to have 56 less students, but that's a variable that we don't know if that's gonna hold true. It's a projection.
So, just a little background on how we come up to the number. The budget process starts in October, where we have a directive to the building principals and to the department heads on what they foresee their building budget to look like in the next year. This year, the directive was, although we want to know everything that you need from what you would like to see as far as moving your programs forward, we also asked them to go in with a very critical eye and the expectation of getting a very minimal increase to your building budgets. And that idea is coming from the state mandated reading program, from the contractual obligations, and knowing just from that alone, it's going to be a number higher than what you are typically used to seeing at this particular stage of the whole budget process. So months of planning, months of work went in through all the departments, and I'm very grateful that we have such a wonderful administrative team to work through these directives and strategically think of what's best and what we can do, and give or forward the business office the numbers that they believe are reasonable for continuing their programs. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Really quick, as we go, feel free, are you guys okay with it?
Stop us, ask any questions as we go.
And then at the end of this meeting, we, I'll remind you guys if you have any questions, because, as you think about it and go through, you're gonna probably have questions that come up after the fact. What day do you want the questions emailed to me by?
If you can get it to us,
Thursday,
if you
Wednesday?
get it to us by Thursday, that'd be great. We can,
Okay.
End of day Thursday, we
So
can work on them on Friday.
I'll send out an email as a reminder, but end of day Thursday, send them to me, and then I'll send them off to Brian and Ashley. I'll compile them and then put them all together for them so they don't get lost in the shuffle. So, and then next week on Tuesday, we have another budget meeting. We have a special meeting where it's our workshop as a board. We go through, answer the questions, and then also next Friday, we have our retreat, which Debbie sent out an email last week or the week before about. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. But next week's budget meeting. So if you don't have questions today as we go through, you're just taking it all in, that's fine. Next week we will, as a board, it's our meeting to talk about any questions, or it's just our discussion as it relates. We don't vote on the budget at that meeting, but we just talk about it. Last year, our meeting was an hour and 15 minutes. I just pulled up the minutes, and yeah, so, I'll remind you at the end, but, sometimes there's afterthoughts after you go through it, now that it's being laid out. All right.
So there is the infamous stacked bar graph, which depicts a breakdown of the budget and the increases. So if I could, looking at the total, 56,403,365, percentage increase is 7.4. Last year's increase, which you'll see momentarily, was 6.4, was the initial budget request. If you look at the $500,000, which is what we have in the budget for the reading program, the state mandated, that is essentially that 1%, which is getting us at the 7.4 versus the 6.4. So if you look at the top part of the bar graph, the orange, that 0.95, which I said is close to 1%, that is the reading program pushing us up to 7.4. Looking at supplies, equipment, that's what Ashley spoke about. That is typically the first area that gets cut when we try to drive that number down further. And then we use end of the year funds to supplement that money back in to buy the equipment and the things that we took out. Transportation, it's a very nominal amount, an increase. We have a five-year contract. It's probably, I think we're on the third year with NBT. So locking up those longer contracts definitely helps with the increase. Transportation and tuition, that's a very small amount of an increase. And then looking at utilities and contracted service at 0.56, you'll see utilities broke out separate. We'll talk about in a moment, but I wish that my own utilities were going up as little as ours are going up as a district. I think most of you will agree. So really taking a good look at those areas, holding those down. The red portion, that 4.37, if you take the current staff that we have in place with the trainer being, which we paid for most of it as a contracted services, but now she's a staff member, which was a little increase in pay. To take our current staff that we have and roll all of that over to next year with their contractual increases based on contract, which average between 2.5 and 3%, and the insurance that's required for us to pay, we would need 4.37% to keep the staff that we currently have. Now, there's some anomalies that could occur, meaning if staff leave, we can hire someone at a lesser rate and things, but that's the number to keep the current staff. So I think the stacked bar graph gives you a picture. Now, what we've been receiving, a 5-year average, is 3.14. So if we were to see 3.14, we would still be over 1 percentage point, really 1.2, below that red bar. So 1.2% of 56, you're looking at, over 600,000, 600,000, not to give you a rough ballpark, of what we'd be short just to maintain our staff. And as I go through the budget, you'll see other pieces that are of concern moving forward. So, any questions about this at this moment? Just an overall quick picture of the budget.
So when we look
at what is driving this 7.40%. There's 4 major areas. So there's the materials and the repairs and maintenance. So a lot of that is our custodial materials, any kind of equipment we may need just that break. For example, office phones, the equipment that we use to clean, repair and maintenance costs on our transportation vehicles. We have a very old fleet. We are trying our best to get new vehicles in that fleet so our repair and maintenance costs go down. But for the most part, our aging fleet has increased our transportation costs for repair and maintenance. Staffing, so there's 3% contractual obligations for our certified staff contracts, so that's driving up the cost. The rate for the per diem substitutes is also, as you know, last board meeting we increased that daily rate, but as I shared in that meeting, that account is underfunded. So to offset some of that cost, you see an increase in that particular line. There's the staff for the athletic trainer, even though we reallocated about $36,000 from contracted services into a salary account, there is still a deficit to cover her salary and benefits, so that is increasing. The technology and equipment, Craig and I spoke of our replacement cycle and how we don't have one. We use end of year funds, so the superintendent's budget, as it historically does have what we would need if we did not have any end of year funds. And then, of course, the state mandated reading program that Lori spoke of earlier this evening.
You saw this graph in Linda's presentation, but I think it's important to note that the special education budget is almost 25% of the overall budget, and that a lot of the funds that are tied to the special education program are IEP'd, meaning that these are needs that students were mandated by law to provide to students. And we've not added paraprofessionals unless it's something that's come out of a PPT. Linda's asked for paras multiple years, and we just haven't added those to the budget. And as she said earlier, the BCBA we did not add. So I just think it's important to note that special education is a big driver of the overall budget at 24.2%.
So this is the budget as a whole, where you could kind of track where our significant changes are happening. We're going to individually go through each of these categories.
So this is more for your reference. We'll go through each one and explain what the increase is and why it's where it's at. But if you want to look at a caption of everything, this is the reference slide. So looking at the administrator salaries here, you can see the key drivers. Ashley spoke of it's 3% increase for all administrators. Annual annuity structures changed. Additional vacation day buyout. Salary adjustment for under budgeted accounts for an FY25. There's anomalies when we have administrators that are out on leave, still receiving pay, new administrators coming in. There's some things with the budget that aren't planned. That have occurred this year and other years. So that being said, it's an overall increase of 2.61%, even though the administrator increase is 3%. Certified staff, negotiated contract is 3%. 99 teachers are advancing in step. That's not a lot compared to the total number of teachers. But they're advancing a step, so that creates a greater than a 3% increase. If everyone's getting 3, the step puts an additional funding on there to the, and summer school teachers, what we're paying for our summer school teachers also is a driver.
If I could add to that, the last 2 years, the summer school teachers were paid out of ARP ESSER, which was fully exhausted in September of 2024. So that $70,000 that we typically budget for end of school year, or for the extended school year program is now back into the budget.
And just one other note, if you look at the slide starting with 21-22, you can see a downward trend. That's the number of staff members that we currently have. We have decreased the number of teachers every year, and a downward trend to get to the number that is proposed for the budget.
So the drivers for non-certified salaries is of course the athletic trainer. her salary is in there, even though we did reallocate some funds from the contracted service line. There's the increase to the per diem substitute line that I spoke of earlier, and the custodial overtime. So when we talk about what is a non-certified staff member, that's your paraeducators, your clerical staffs, your custodians, your OTPTs, your tutors, your IT department staff, your substitutes, and your athletic trainers. So everybody who is not certified to educate children is considered a non-certified staff member, and there are currently 211.9 uncertified staff members on payroll. Employee benefits encompasses your health insurance, your Social Security, your Medicare pension, life insurance, retirement, unemployment, any kind of annuity, and your staff course reimbursements. The driver here is, of course, our health insurance. We are budgeted at a 10% increase from our existing cost share here. When we come up with this number, we do adjust any kind of cost share adjustments. So typically, many of the contracts, the employee portion goes up about 0.5 point, and then the employer portion goes down that 0.5 point. I did receive notification late Friday afternoon that the actual, or what they are projecting for a real increase to insurance, is anywhere between 12 to 15%. We are not going to increase it more than the 10 at this time. We do have a coalition agreement that kind of prohibits us from increasing that, but hopefully the actual adjustment that comes to us is at that 10 or lower. And the other driver here is we increase the staff course reimbursement. The last 3 years, we've exceeded the amount that the teacher's contract have for staff course reimbursement because the number, it's twofold. There's more people participating in that particular benefit, and the cost of tuition has also increased. So the reimbursement has exceeded that $55,000.
Just a little bit about that staff reimbursement for the new board members. If you are a certified staff member and you already have your master's degree and you'd like to go back for your 6th year, we reimburse with approval 2 UConn, the cost of 2 UConn credits, 2 courses annually. So we had a lump sum of $50,000. We increased that because it was over the amount in the course, as Ashley said, the courses were going up. If I could speak to the health insurance for a moment, the way that's handled with the town sets the number for us, and it's always at 10%. Typically, it's come in at 7 or 8%, or even, we've done better some years. The town, we don't readjust our budget. The town would take the additional funds, and that would go back into their budget. So the hope is, if it comes in at 12 or 15, the town's gonna say, we're not gonna readjust your budget for additional, we're gonna take care of it, just like we took care of the other end, we kept the money, we're gonna help you on the other end, because we wrote the budget at 10%, and that's what we're we're expecting that to be, regardless of what it comes in at, higher or lower.
So contracted services, Craig and I spoke about this, about our software subscriptions. You heard Cara and Lori also discuss some of our software subscriptions. Those are coming in anywhere between 4 to 7.5%. That includes our Power Schools, our Tyler Technologies, which is our accounting software, and our Frontline, and many of our educational softwares as well. Linda spoke how her professional services are going up. So in this particular account, her line, you'll see that is a driver in the contracted service line, and then increased professional development for some of the programs that we have to roll out.
And one of the major professional developments is that we are adopting a new reading program, so there will need to be PD and training the staff on that program. As I spoke of earlier about the utility increase, I would love to see my personal utilities only increase 1.58%. And that's just locking in contracts and negotiating multi-year with the various utilities. So it's a nominal increase that we believe we can, $7,800 total for the year. That's very good budgeting.
So transportation here, Brian spoke, we do have a 5-year contract with New Britain Transportation. We are currently in year 3. Annual increase to that contract is 3% every year. So in addition to the 3% contractual increase, we are seeing the cost of fuel, particularly gasoline, go up. So we are budgeting for additional gasoline, and it's not going up as the sense of the price per gallon. Hopefully we see some relief with that. There's been a transition from diesel buses to gasoline buses. And even though our diesel account is being reduced to accommodate for the number of buses that are using gasoline, we did have to take an increase on our gasoline line. Repair and maintenance, as I spoke of before, those lines are also going up because age of fleet. I could share a document with you to show you what we have on the road currently, and we need vans desperately, and we see that with our increased cost in repair and maintenance. And then we have, as much as we try to adjust our tech school runs by making community stops, the number of students that go to tech schools has increased slightly, and with that, so have the transportation runs with that. So we're looking at an overall increase of 3.84%. Special education transportation costs are budgeted net of excess costs, which means when we come up with the number for special education transportation, we reduce the amount we are allocating from the excess cost reimbursement.
About tuition here, so we're saying that's a 3% increase for special education outplacements. That means the facilities that we're sending students to, it's a 3% increase on average. One anticipated outplacement, there's $100,000 in the budget just in case we have an additional outplacement for the following year. And the CNA program tuition, as we spoke of, we did have grants that helped to pay for that. We're still in search of those grants. The program has been very successful, and there's enough students to run the program twice a year. The other part about tuition, that only 1.53% or $34,000, that's also based on what Linda has shared with you earlier, that the expectation that we'll have some students that they will age out or not be receiving the outplacement that they had in previous years. So that's why that's not a greater increase than the $34,000. This is very much a variable target based on the students. If we have students who are outplaced that move into the district, if that's what their IEP says, we are required by law to maintain that outplacement. So we could have a student receiving services at a facility, and we would have to find the funds to, if they move to town, to maintain that.
Another thing that is in this particular tuition line is the adjustment for the magnet school and the vocational school tuition. So we don't pay tuition for tech schools, we just pay transportation. But students that are enrolled in a magnet or vocational school, we do pay their tuition to those school districts. There's been some legislative changes that is adjusting the amount of funds that a local district is responsible for. So that further adjustment, the first adjustment was last year, there's a further adjustment going forward for fiscal 26 that has been taken into account for this particular tuition. There has been some talk that eventually the structure is local budgets will not be responsible for tuitions for vocational or magnet schools. Whether or not that comes to fruition, we still don't know, so we do have to keep funding available in the event that we are tuitioned for those handful of kids that go.
But even so, it's only 1.53%.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Am I supposed to wait till the
No, you can jump right in.
Jump right in.
So for the students who may come from a different town who have services that they're being outplaced for, is there like a reevaluation
Like the
for when?
Hartford Choice.
So, so there's a
We only take
misconception.
students from Hartford.
Let me,
Yeah.
you speak to Hartford
Yeah,
Choice?
yeah.
I
So,
can-
so I think there is a misconception on the services that we provide for our choice students. So when a choice student requires any additional service outside of the $6,000 reimbursement or grant fund that we get from the Open Choice program, it is billed directly to Hartford. So if we have a student that requires an outplacement, I invoice Hartford, Hartford pays us. So we're not paying for that student, if that makes sense.
So I don't know if that's what I'm asking.
If choice students receive any services, reading service, any services beyond, we would bill Hartford for the services. It's not, that's how they come from. But until, the whole diagnostic portion, the whole part, until they get to receive the services, which is a PPT and so on, we have to provide. And, speaking of choice for a moment, We have a number of students, based on our model we've had for the last 5 years, we're taking students like K and 1, and any siblings in other grades. We're having a preponderance of students that are requiring one-to-one paraprofessionals or are needing outplacements and because of behavioral issues and other issues. So is that the question you're asking?
I don't think that's what I'm
Okay,
asking.
What do you, someone moves to town? I mean,
So, because you said if a student comes from a different town and moves to Berlin, then we consume their outplacement
yes,
costs.
yes.
So
Once they are a resident.
Is there a
we have
reevaluation? That's all I'm asking.
No, yes, we could call PPT and reevaluate the outplacement, but if the parent doesn't agree at a PPT, it goes to what's called due process. And during due process, they would stay at whatever educational environment they currently are in. So we have not, knock on wood, gone to due process often at all. To credit
Linda's really good
to
at
credit to
keeping
Linda
us
and her
out of
team
it.
and the relationships we have with parents and the multitude of programs that we have in-house.
I was just gonna say, because from my understanding, we have a lot of resources within our district, so I wasn't sure if maybe somebody was receiving services from an outside source, if there's a reevaluation, maybe it's something that we
Absolutely.
could provide
Absolutely.
in-house.
So if someone was having, let's say the Transition Academy, and they were moved, and they were going to Transition Academy, where they, whatever, because there's Transition Academies that are on-site at Wesleyan, there's Transition Academies in Farmington Valley. They were going there, and we had the same service, we could say we can provide that here. And then we'd have the argument, if we're providing similar service, and we went to due process, and it was agreed that we did, then they would come to us. But if they didn't agree, we could end up having to pay the transportation and tuition there.
Which is fine, I just wasn't
Can
sure.
I ask 2 follow-up questions to that while we're talking about
Sure.
it? Okay, I forgot one. How much does due process cost?
Well, the legal
I'm
fees.
just curious.
We haven't
Because
been into.
we've avoided it, so just the legal fees of due process using,
It depends how far it goes.
what's
and
the
how many
range?
hours.
Is it like, it's 10,000?
Why
Oh,
throw
oh,
that
oh,
into
yes,
the universe?
yes.
No, blah, blah, blah,
Yes,
blah.
yes, it could be all of
Because I
10,000.
think it gives some
It could be,
context.
it could be all of 10,000.
What?
It could be all of 10,000.
Right,
And
and
if
the-
you lose the due process because you weren't providing, then you have the outplacement, which we already said is $100,000 minimum. So you lose the lawyer fees, and then you lose if it has to be.
Like, when was the last time, or how often have we had someone move into town who was already outplaced?
Last year.
Last year, right.
I think
thought
we
it
had a
was fairly
family that had
recent.
multiple students last year.
Right. That's what I was, okay. And if we call the reevaluation, do they have to agree to it, or no, you just have to wait for their annual if they don't
No,
agree?
you could call PPT, right, and you could review the IEP. And if they agreed to it, that's great. If they didn't agree to it, then you would start the process. If they chose to go due process, because they're choosing to say that this educational environment, you cannot give the same quality of services to meet that child's specific needs. And then sometimes it gets to a point where someone decides whether you do or don't, and then that's the due process.
And then you have no say in that process.
Well, you state your case. and
Right,
what you
but then
feel
once
right.
they decide, it's decided.
And like I said, it's to credit to Linda and her team that we
Yeah,
have it. It's the relationship
absolutely.
with the parents and the multitude of services that we offer.
I think it's important when you're talking about the special education tuition to just keep it in the back of your head that it's variable, right? So for somebody moving in, we could have somebody moving out. So it's always constantly a moving target. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose.
When it rains, it pours.
I could speak to this real quickly. I mean, just right off the top here, state mandated reading program is a huge driver in the increase of supplies, textbooks, materials. We have an increase for custodial prize supplies and materials. Ashley spoke of that, just inflation. The custodians over my years in the district, when we have outsiders go into buildings, our buildings are kept clean for the most part. People rave about how clean the buildings are, even the older buildings. But the high school being used multiple times by the state in walking through, the custodians do a real nice job of maintaining the building, given the age that the buildings are. And administrative supplies, we talked about just inflationary. And you can read on the right, what we've talked about stuff like textbooks, consumables, athletic supplies, where the drivers are.
So the big one here, $439,000 increase for equipment. Bulk of this is the technology that we spoke of earlier. So that's our classroom projectors, Chromebooks, iPads, the athletic equipment that Dave talked about, and then our operational equipment that we need just when things break. Again, here the driver is the technology, and if we don't have any end-of-year funds and we don't have this in the budget, then we cannot proceed with our technology program.
Wanna take this one? The last one?
Sure. So the drivers for our all other services are basically our professional organization fees. So that's our CABE, our CASBO, our SIP. Those are the organizations that we all belong to for professional development and networking. The tournament fees for athletics have also increased, and then any kind of minor building improvements that we may need that would not fall in what we call Department 61 that goes to the town of Berlin side.
And then the armed security, this is not, I think I just want to clarify, this is not part of the operational budget for the Berlin Board of Ed. It's in what we call Department 61, so it's on the town side. And really, the drivers here, new service weapons, it's not that their current guns are not operational. The Berlin police switched the type of gun that they're carrying, and to be consistent, just in case there was a crisis, the recommendation by the chief and John, our security director, is that their armed security have the same firearm that the police have. So they'll obviously, the old guns will be sold back to at a nominal cost, and the new guns purchased. That's the equipment increase there, 11,000, and then a 3% wage increase. So those are the drivers for our security.
So this next section is our additional funding sources that kind of offset the overall cost. So what we're discussing with you today is the general fund, so that's your local tax dollar. The overall operating budget for the Board of Education exceeds that $52 million that you see in our existing operating budget. So these are just some additional funds that we get from state and federal. You can see some trends as to where these funds are coming from. So many of these funds are state funds and are federal funds. Most of these are entitlement grants. So the grants that are projected, or what these numbers are, what we would get year after year after year. And since 2021, they have trended down. The difference in the state funding is primarily the choice reimbursement. So that is variable depending on our enrollment there. But you could see how we are trending down on our state funding.
Just a note on the choice funding, we were at 4% 2 years ago. We've been at 3% in the threes. So the difference in reimbursement goes from 8,000 to 6,000. It's multiplied by the number of students. So the funding continues to decrease. It's not just Berlin, that there's not enough choice candidates that are interested in many towns. And also, that number there, we haven't, and I don't believe it's best interest to open up more than our K and 1 to start opening up other grade levels for choice students. We did that 6 years ago, and it did not lead to, it led to students acclimating to the district, behavioral problems. It was not the best model. So our numbers are trending down, and we now, once we get below, if we get below 3%, the reimbursement rate drops to 4,000 per student versus 6,000. And I just want to say that with the choice funding, the entire amount of choice funding that we receive is spent on staff. There's direct individual staffing position tied to the entire choice account. So not receiving the funding, adequate funding, would mean that we wouldn't have funding for positions. Obviously, moving other positions out, but there's over 9 staff members that are tied to.
There's
You want to get the exact number?
Yeah, there's 16 people, approximately 15 positions, because the FTE count isn't full in some of them.
They're partial.
Partials, yep.
Thank you.
One other thing that is important about the state and federal entitlement grants is a lot of it is tied to our, what we call the DERG, or the social economic status of the town itself. So the town's ability to pay. As our wealth ranking increases, entitlement funds decrease. So keep that in mind as well. Federal funds are also going down. The big driver here is the exhaustion of our ESSER grants. So we have been able to take advantage of those ESSER grants to offset some of our costs in the local tax or in the local government budget, or the general fund budget, which is funded by local tax dollars. And with that, I don't know what that message is, but so with that exhaustion of those funds, the burden shifts back to the local tax dollar. So as you could see, we are trending significantly down in our federal dollars when it comes to those types of grants.
The other thing that, with the change in the political nature at the federal level, we don't know if those funds are even going to decrease even further, which has been mentioned in the news. So, but they are trending down anyways.
And then, of course, Brian spoke of this briefly a couple slides ago, is the open choice and the open choice enrollment. So the open choice enrollment, as that trends down, so does the reimbursement that we receive from the open choice program. Next year's projected budget, what we're projecting for our reimbursement is $675,600. And from an account or from a grant that used to provide close to $1 million, that's a pretty big hit. Another thing that always comes up when we talk about open choice, and I'll move on to here, is, you're gonna hear this at probably every single meeting, but you had $500,000 in choice. I have to keep $500,000 in choice to fund payroll for the next year. If I do not keep a balance in choice, we will not have enough to fund the 16 people that are in that account.
Let me explain this also. The only account that we can roll over year to year is choice. So if there's funds left in choice, which we need to pay the salaries for the following year, that's the monies that are left at the end of the year. Anything in the operational budget has to be zeroed out by July 1st. So that's where the misnomer comes in, that we had this extra money sitting in choice, that's the slush account. We can print out, we have for the board, and I wasn't sure how many positions, but there's 16 now, and we do move people from within into the choice account that are paid from the choice account with these funds.
So just to give you an idea of who's paid, we have got 1 administrator, we have 5 teachers, and then we have paraeducators, custodians, and clerical staff that are funded out of choice. So if we run that choice down to $0, there will be more significant cuts. So that is the purpose of why we keep a balance in choice.
But, please.
So, I think I might have asked this question before. So, what did we do before choice? Because choice wasn't always with us, correct? How long have we had choice?
We've had choice probably for the last 15 years.
15, okay. So, we're offsetting salaries, important staff, on that money, correct? Is that what I'm understanding? So, because it's a program that we don't know what's gonna happen, right? It's variable in a sense. We don't know if there's gonna be the enrollment that we're hoping for. Why would we wanna offset salaries that are so important for a program that isn't totally reliable?
Because what happened over the years, and this goes back before my superintendency, you were at 1% for 7 years, 1 point something. So without upping the choice numbers to get to $8,000, you would have not been able to fund a multitude of positions. So the reason that choice increased to have the 4% is we need the funding to have the positions that we wouldn't otherwise be cutting. So the question is, yes, we could stop choice and go on a decreasing model, which we kind of are, went 4 to 3. But then those positions, we'd have to put in the operational budget, and if we're not getting the number to increase, so just think about it, if it's 500,000, a little more than that now, so you're talking about 0.2 increase per 100,000. So every time, like we just dropped to 600 some odd thousand, that they're looking at $300,000 that we're losing, a little less than that, from paying salaries.
Yeah, I'm not saying we should discontinue the program, but it's so unreliable. Like it would be scary to me that your people's salaries are being based on something we don't know if the money's, I know you're saying you're putting it there, which is a smart way of budgeting, but it's also.
Was the other option is not to hire the positions, which means you have a void, and you're not meeting students' needs. Because you have, I didn't know, I knew there was, I didn't know there was an administrator and 5 staff members that are in there, so, you know.
To give you an idea of the type of positions that we have, so we have the Dean of Students over at McGee is paid out of choice. We have 1 special education teacher. We have 2 social workers. We have 2 math specialists, custodian, our kindergarten paras, and a couple of duty paras. We also have our work-based learning coordinator paid out of choice. So those are the types of positions that we pay out of choice. Yes.
Yeah, they're all
Yep.
important people. I would be, if, like you said, if the trend keeps going downward, I don't know,
No, it's just like the ESSER money. We didn't put people in the ESSER until we were directed to the town and say, we'll help you if need be, so you don't hit that cliff. Other districts did. They got the ESSER money, they added tons of staff, and then they had to make cuts. And that's a difficult place to be. Choice is a variable now. It wasn't for years. We stayed at 4%. We knew what we were getting. We could budget for it, but it's trending down.
And it's with all the districts, but do you think there's a possibility that it might go back, might trend upward again, or?
I don't think unless they change the model, transportation is a big issue for parents. And you know, putting your child on a bus for 45 minutes and then, you know, there's anomalies with the start of school not getting there, and then the transportation is difficult. And I think that it's not just Berlin that's seeing a decrease in choice.
It's everyone.
Right.
Thank you for explaining.
So our next slide is it's just more for your reference, our historical excess cost reimbursements, which helps offset the special education tuition and transportation. That's pretty steady, and that again is variable based on your student enrollment and which students qualify for excess cost reimbursement funds. So this next section is our funding comparisons. We often see a lot of this throughout the entire budget process. How do we compare to districts around us? How do we compare to the districts in our DERS? And what are we doing in comparison to the state level?
So when you look at this slide here, it shows that average rate that was also on the stacked bar. All the red line is what we received, that going back to, I think it's 16, 17, the 1%, and then being in the 3s since 1920, and what we received, 2.5 that one year, and then roughly. If you take that 7.4 at the end and you reduce it by the reading program, you're back down to what last year's request was, which is the 6.4. And then just to think about the 4.4, which is really benefits and salary increases, you're talking about a 2% increase for everything else. You know, you're talking a little over $1 million on the budget. Looking at this is a chart, and it's criticized. So if you have any questions, I'd like you to. We've done it for years, and the reason why we have these towns are not in our DERG, but they're towns that Berlin. Some are, but Berlin associates and talks about these towns. People do, so that's why they're here. Newington, Cromwell, they're towns on proximity. Farmington, Rocky Hill. Looking at the adopted 24-25 budget last year, we were the lowest of all those towns at 3.21. If you look at our 5-year average, which you'll see that we were 3rd from the bottom. Okay, it was, you know, the 2.75 and the 3.12 and then 3.14 for Berlin. So I just think this slide gives a snapshot of what it's taking to fund other districts, because they're hiring teachers like we're hiring teachers. They're maintaining buildings. They're doing the same things that we're trying to do, and it just gives a notion of what they've needed for funding. It often gets criticized, this slide, but I think it's important for you to know about it and for the public to know, you know, as compared to these other towns. This slide tells a different story. It's one that we haven't had in other years. If you look at that green line going across, that's the state average.
That's the DERG average.
I'm sorry, DERG average, my fault, DERG average. And the same towns, these are towns that have social and economic for our DERG, they're similar. You're looking at, these are actual increases that towns received last year as compared. So the average, we were below the average, If you get to the average, where you hit the line, you're at 4.53%, or 4, whatever it is right there, where the line, and then all the way up to the last one, 6 point something. Again, it just gives a reference of what other towns are receiving to operate their schools. So, I think it's important for for the Board of Finance to see it, as well as the community. Here's my state, I apologize for the two. The green line is the state average. This slide, we're often said against the DIRG, we're right in the middle. This is our per pupil expenditure. It's what we spend per pupil to educate in Berlin. We're smack in the middle as compared to the other towns that are listed there. Well, maybe one, we're close to the middle, we're close to the median there, at 21,000, and the state's average is 22. But you're looking at it and say, well, that's only about $1,000, but $1,000 times 2,600 students, it's definitely a huge increase.
And our last section is the good news, what we're doing right in Berlin through our student achievements and our recognitions. It's not all doom and gloom.
Obviously, we'd like to be higher here than where we are, but typically we're in the upper third or the upper quartile. The ELA, we're in the upper quartile for both. I think we were first or second for math last year. We're down a little, but it can be a point or two that you're below the one or two towns that are above. So we're still relatively strong as far as achievement as compared to the towns in our DIRG for ELA, and this is a composite from grades 3 to 8. And looking at the next generation science, which is our 11th grade science, fourth in our DIRG, upper quartile. And then our SAT, a little bit above the mean and median. I think it's important to note that achievement is strong, and part of the achievement is the educational environment, the opportunities that are provided, and the budget ties directly to that. Without having the funds and the resources to provide adequate staffing and programming, would definitely have an impact on student achievement. And we've received some great recognitions over the years. We have multiple schools that have received the best U.S. News and Report rankings. Our ROCAP and National Honor Society, DECA's received awards. The Seal of Biliteracy is something we added a few years ago for our world language. As you know, the gentleman behind me, our broadcasting awards we received, changing the program here and the number of students involved. Just to say, the Halo Awards also does with that, and the arts program. So it's not as though good things are not happening, and hopefully there's more to come here. And any questions at this time, or if not, and you email them to us, we will get you the answers. Peter.
For the administrators, from 23, 18, it was 18.8 FTE, year 24 to 21.8. Was that the year we were converting those 3 positions from teacher to admin? What was it, Dean of Students?
Dean of Students.
Yes.
It was felt that they really weren't operating as teachers they should be in. There was a conversation with the BEA, which it was the right place to put them.
And the other point is just emphasizing the fact that the federal and state spending is decreasing. Because if you do take a close look at that, the loss of funding from that equates to $626,000, and that's over 1% of our budget. If you factor that plus the mandate of the $500,000 for the reading, you're talking about almost $1.2 million. That's completely out of our control. So that I forget the number, if it's 3.8 or 3.4. I mean, it really, in a way, you're kind of subtracting 1.2 from that because you have no element of control over those funding sources or that mandate coming in.
I think, and from a bigger perspective with that, if you look at why the number's at 7.4, without having really anything new coming in, new programming, new staffing, that's the reason why.
Yeah, right.
Funding's down, reading programs increasing 500,000, and then you have contractual obligations.
Okay, so we can sit here for a minute, you guys can take it all in and ask some questions, but tonight you'll get an email from me reminding you to send me questions by Thursday at 5, and then Thursday you'll get another email saying last call for questions, and then Brian and Ashley will prepare them, and we will have them Tuesday for our budget workshop to talk about. We'll all get them at the same time, and I just compile them all into a doc, and just put them together and they can work on it. So we all know the questions everyone's asking. But take a few minutes if you need to, and don't hesitate.
If I could just comment, throughout the years, I always appreciated the board's candor on the budget and working together to determine what, once we get a number that comes back, what the cuts should be and how we should make those cuts, and what's best for our students moving forward.
Are there any questions? Really quick, so just before we adjourn, I just want to remind everyone, that our retreat is next Friday, the 24th at 5 p.m. Okay, Peter, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Aye. Jess. Is Jamie there? Did Jamie vote?
I oppose, for the record.